Welcome back to the Benji and Cal podcast. This is another special episode, episode 7. We thought we would just keep things chill this time. It's been a little crazy going on in the world, and so let's talk about war.
War.
War. As well as peace.
Peace? Nah, just war.
Just war.
We're just doing war. We're going to war. We're
Going to war over war.
over war.
Exactly.
Because there's not enough war in the world nowadays. You know? Too much peace.
I completely disagree, and I will go to war with you over that.
Oh. But, as always, let's start with a definition. What is war?
Okay, but I'm going to throw out a definition, but I have no intention of coming up with a definition now that we're going to really stick to. But anyway, we're talking about human conflict, first of all, although we might use animal conflicts as inspiration for reasoning about human conflict. And primarily, we're talking about human conflict between established political entities, countries, states. But of course, you can have smaller scale tribes, even families, mafia warfare, or something like that. Is that fair, or do I now have to define what a conflict is?
Oh. I mean, I'll tell you my definition, and my definition goes back a little further. So, war is when you want to impose your reality on another.
Mm.
So you said conflict, but competing interests, and diplomacy has failed, and the only option is violence. Or I guess you could have, you don't have to have a hot war, it could be a cold war, but it's
Mm.
a competition, a battle, a back and forth, a tug of war, if you will. And it's really just about forcing. You're trying to force and enforce your reality on the other person, or whatever it is. You said humans, but originally, if we look at the rawest, purest form of war, we go to the animal kingdom. You have two animals, elks, butting heads, competition because they want, let's say, the territory or to mate, and they are, there's only room for one or their pack, their own. It's them against the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes down to just who's got the bigger antlers at the end of the game.
Okay. I already have a question. What is the difference between war and competition in general? Because of course you can have games. You can have when two people are playing a game against each other, they're competing, but we wouldn't say they're at war certainly. So
Well, in a sense, they are at war, I would say.
okay, and is that a quantitative difference that a war is just kind of a more intense game, or is there something different about war?
Well, a game, you know, I would say that the implications aren't, on reality, aren't life changing. They're not mortal. They're not harmful. You play a game, whoever loses, not going to die unless it's Squid Game or something.
Hmm.
Um, there's, games have cooperation, wars can have cooperation. I'd say it's a mixture of scale and um, risk.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's yeah, certainly. Once a game becomes right, there's that expression, "This is no longer a game," or "This isn't a game." A game as a competitive activity has to be something kind of removed from reality, or is something kind of like where we kind of escape into it. It's a bit make believe. But once something becomes real, there are certainly similarities between warfare and game playing in the sense of trying to beat your opponent, strategizing, and of course there are war games. There are games that
Right.
model
That's what I was
war.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's that famous movie from the 80s. I don't know if you ever saw it.
I saw like bits and pieces on TV. War games, it's called, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like some kid is brought in because he's like, genius whiz kid. It's sort of like Ender's Game or something. If you're good at games, you should be good at war.
Hmm.
So I might amend my definition slightly in that it is different from a game. Why is it war games? War is a state of a game, I would say, or it's a state of mind. Like when you're at war. We are now at war. It's a whole paradigm shift. Everything in the mind, maybe even like the primal mind
Mm.
shifts. Boom, war, fight or flight. And it's just like an instinct of nature to be in the state of war. And you could, it's like a the killer mentality sort of. And you could bring it in a game or something.
Hmm. That actually might be why it does take a certain strength of character to be able to bring that mentality into a game, because you have to be able to bring it in a controlled manner, right? People said that Michael Jordan had this killer mentality, but if he had a killer mentality, he is still playing the game of basketball. So if he were to actually start running around hurting people, we'd all be like, Michael, stop that. What's wrong with you? But to be able to bring in a kind of warlike mentality, but be able to control it and adapt and apply it to something that is definitely not war, but to be able to use that for your competitive advantage. That's probably why many people don't have that. That's something for the
Hmm.
for the great among us.
Right. And I mean, if we want to talk classically, men were in the past were the ones who usually fought the wars. So, that was they had a state of killer instinct. Similar in just the natural world. It's the males that I mean, there's probably different animals, maybe some that exhibit, females where the roles are reversed, but traditionally it's men. You have tribes that I saw this video of like uh, the last war scene between tribes that that was caught on TV or caught on camera, and it had all of these natives. They were with their spears. And they were like yelling at each other from across the hills. They were ready. They were separate. They were like, this is it. You have your resources, whatever it is. That's what it's all about, right? That's the other thing about war. It's usually, you want to get something that the other person has, or you're defending your own against the other person trying to take what you have.
Hmm. Wait, sorry. When did this show up, and when was this?
So this was, I think, some tribes that were left over survived, the modern era, maybe in Australia or something. And so these researchers were able to, record this
Hmm.
without interfering. It's an interesting thing, when you think about it, that researchers would go and they'd see, people about to kill each other, but we let them do their own thing. If there's uh, if there's if they're about to go to war, we don't just impose our modern society upon them, because even though that's might be the moral thing to do, to step in.
We're definitely going to talk about that. It's
Yeah.
actually not. It's actually not so simple.
Mm,
That's the moral thing to do
right.
for reasons I'll get into and we'll get into.
Yeah. There was a guy, who went to try to preach to people or something, to some native tribe, and then they killed him or something. Like, what are you gonna do? Lock them up and enforce your modern concept of jail on these natives that attack this invader? So okay, we don't have to get. I
Yeah.
just want to throw that out.
No, it's a good question. But yeah, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure when we get to actually discussing difficult questions like that, we actually like focus on it. So that's why,
Mhm.
yeah.
So we spoke about what war is as a concept. Now, a little bit about the history. Um, but before that, why? Why do people, just to clarify, why do you think countries, people go to war?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it already. Um, Irreconcilable differences, competing interests that uh, cannot be um, cannot be reconciled through
Because
diplomacy.
they're irreconcilable.
Yeah, I was trying to find another word there. I couldn't couldn't come up with it. Uh, so they couldn't be reconciled through diplomacy. Of course, you know, everyone will have kind of a different threshold of the amount of diplomacy they are willing to go through, or that they kind of mustered up the willpower to go through before resorting to war. Obviously, if you feel you are much more powerful than your opponent and you're going to win a war, you'll be more willing to go to war. If you feel you're weaker, you're going to try diplomacy with more insistence. Um, but it at the end of the day comes from what you said, that that it's these competing interests that clash with each other, and they need to be uh, reconciled somehow, whether through diplomacy or war.
Hmm. So I would expand upon that maybe throughout history we could look at why did they start? Why did wars start? Territorial disputes, fighting for resources, mates, self-defense, and from there it kind of evolved to like for divine power. We look at history, we see all these empires trying to spread,
Mhm.
in the name of some god or just their culture, to get trade routes, more power, more tax-paying subjects to really grow their empire so that they could get just more power and just grow. Um, and then there's like a period of glory and honor. You got to fight because that's what you got to do. We're soldiers, we're men, we're for the glory, for the honor of fighting. I don't know. It was something. It's very interesting looking at war in feudal Japan. Um, there were just a group of people within the society that were just warriors. That's all they did. I
Mhm.
mean, we have that now, but like back then, it was so important. Just this is your role.
There was more of a I think this connects. There was more of an honor-based ethic back
Hmm.
then, which um, I haven't read about this in a while. I might struggle to explain it, but instead of the ethic of the ethic of don't harm, which is like pretty much the primary ethic of nowadays, do what you want but don't harm. There was much more of a prominent ethic of honor back then, which was about it wasn't about don't harm. It was about what are you expected to do? What is your destiny? And you know, what like
Your role and
yeah,
maintaining the order of the social order.
yeah,
And
that might be
if someone were to insult your honor, then you would be obligated to fight. If another,
yeah.
like diplomacy was, it was a thing, but they were much quicker, I think, to get ready to take their lives, take someone else's life,
Mhm.
uh, commit ritual suicide for honor. It was expected to just give your life just like that. And it evolved definitely a lot since then. Nowadays, we want to avoid confrontation at all costs, it seems, in a lot of society, especially modern Western society. And
Yeah.
we'll get into that. But just to finish the history, so it was about spreading culture and in the Middle Ages and religion. And then in the 19th century, 20th century, it's nationalism, spreading political systems, communism, capitalism, fighting each other. I mean, World War II was fascism, um, also, Lebensraum, living space. And then
What's that?
that was, one of the one of Hitler's reasons for war was more living space for the German people to grow for the
Mm.
glory of Germany.
Okay. I never heard that word before.
Hmm.
That German word.
Yeah, just something somewhere in my brain from grade 11 history.
Uh huh.
Mhm. And then nowadays, it's shifted to be about moral reasons. I think taking down oppressive regimes, fighting back against oppressive regimes, um, and it's all about reducing civilian losses, about uh, just trying to keep everything, trying to get to a ceasefire as quick as possible. I think if you were to take someone from, 200 years ago, even 100 years ago, to see that nowadays they would say, why are you trying to like bring everyone to a ceasefire after one day?
Mm-hmm.
This is war. This is what we
Right.
do. This is life.
Some might have said, I think back in the day, some might have said, you fight till victory. You
Hmm.
fight. We're gonna go. We're gonna fight. We're gonna win. We're gonna completely vanquish the enemy. Or even if they know that that's not possible, you still you fight to the death.
Hmm.
I'm not going to surrender. I'm not going to go for a ceasefire. Even if I lose, I'm going to die fighting. I bet you know, I just
And
feel like a lot of people thought that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think we see that based off of how dueling has, it's outlawed. Even if you have two consenting adults who are willing, to fight for their honor, because that's what you do, to the death, only one of us can prevail. Like, I refuse to live with this dishonor. That's not allowed nowadays, you know? We say, oh, you guys shouldn't really be fighting, this isn't what you truly want. And kind of putting on our moral, outlook on it. Although it's more complicated, obviously, because war does include a lot of non-willing parties. That's the assumption. You know, people who live in a country don't want to go to war. That's kind of the assumption, but it's really only true if they're losing and if they're being harmed.
I actually didn't realize dueling was illegal.
So you're saying
I never
they
really
could have.
thought about it. If I had thought about it, I probably would have just said, "Well, we just don't do it nowadays. Like people just stop doing it."
Uh-huh.
But I didn't really it didn't really occur to me that is the dueling itself illegal, or if I were to win a duel, I could then be tried for murder, and the fact that I was dueling is not an excuse.
I mean, I feel like if you got caught dueling and killed a person, then they might, like your lawyer would go into the law books and try to retrieve some laws about how dueling is okay.
Uh-huh.
And they'd be like, you know, I guess it says that technically, um, but it's been outlawed. It's not like I mean, if you don't kill the guy, then you could just say you're playing. I don't know if you both shoot and you only get one bullet and you both miss. But you're saying if you kill a guy, I don't know. It maybe it's just manslaughter, you know, because it's self defense. Um,
Well, self-defense that you walked into.
Right. Um, it's I don't know the specifics on how long you would go to jail for, but it's definitely yeah. If you get caught dueling, I guess they put the both of you away. I don't know.
I don't know.
We gotta.
I never really thought to enter a duel.
mm,
So,
No one has besmirched your honor, and you never felt the need for satisfaction.
well, I mean, part of the reason we're having this conversation is because people have besmirched my honor. Like that is something that continues to exist in me and other people as well, of course, even though there's sort of a societal ethic that has at least ostensibly developed beyond that. But I think we're all still human beings. It's just that I didn't ever think that I would enter a duel over it. I might have gotten upset or I might have gotten into an argument, a vocal argument or debate with somebody over it, but I never would have thought to let's both have a pistol and we'll duel to the death over it.
hmm
That would have seemed extreme.
Well, so I will say this for people who dueled, even though it was extremely dumb, because you're just leaving, you know, a fight up to who could draw a pistol faster.
Hmm.
You know, who's better. It has nothing to do with who's in the right or anything, which is like war, you know. Ultimately, who wins is who's ever better at fighting and as well as, you know, evading diplomatic um, conflicts as well, issues as well.
Hmm.
But I will say that they were probably less repressed back then. You know, nowadays, if you could like get hung up on, you know, what some guy said to you or you know, stole your girlfriend or whatever, and then you're thinking about that or like insulted your what are you going to do if someone insults your mother? You're just going to yell at them. I mean, some people do get into fights, but back then, you either win and you get your satisfaction or you're dead and you don't care.
So, yeah, I don't know actually about what you just said
No?
because I don't know how long we're gonna go down this because I feel like it might get off of war a bit, but
It's war on a smaller scale.
yeah, it's war adjacent.
I don't even think it's adjacent. I think it's war.
The
It's
the
just
dueling.
in the
Oh
purest form.
no, dueling, yes,
Yeah, dueling.
but I'm about to talk about repression
Oh,
of,
okay.
of emotions.
Oh, all right.
um,
Well, let it out.
so, all right. So, were they less repressed back then, and are we more repressed now because we don't get out our, you know, our
Violent tendencies.
yes, our insults to our pride, our violent instincts in a duel? Well, or in war for that matter. So here's the thing: um, if somebody enters a duel still upset, right, and they're riding on emotion and they're letting emotion control them, I think they're more likely to lose that duel. The person who's more likely to win the duel is the one who's cool-headed.
Uh, the person who's more likely to win is the one who's more practiced and
That's also, of course,
especially under pressure.
yeah, of course. But I think part of practice, if we say that it requires practice, we're accepting that it is a sort of skill that is learned. It's not just you can't just run on instinct. It's something refined, something that requires a little training, a little polishing. And it would seem to me that the one yes, granted that he's practiced, granted that he at least knows what he's doing. The one who has kind of gotten over his hurt at this point and is now focused on the game, focused on the duel, and he's focused on it with a clear head. He strikes me as more likely to win. Very much in a similar way to how we do have vocal duels nowadays, right? We don't get together and pull out pistols. But right, you mentioned when somebody insults your mother or something. So we still have insults to pride nowadays, of course. And there is still right something you learn when it comes to this vocal sparring that if somebody insults your mother, let's say. So the way you win against somebody who insults your mother is to get back at him, but not in a way that you were worked up, right? You retain your clear head and you say something really much more clever and much more biting to him, and you get under his skin, but in a way that like I'm playing the game, I'm in control, I'm playing the game, I'm getting under your skin, you're not getting under my skin, that sort of thing. Like that's how somebody really wins in today's vocal sparring. And it seems to me that
Mm,
that's how somebody wins in dueling as well.
I see. Yeah, I mean, it's a difference in what skills it takes nowadays. Um, I would say, yeah, I've seen, let's say, people. I was watching something about people insulting other people on a podcast, and it brought down the whole podcast. Not this podcast. Um,
I hope not.
a different podcast, and they were kind of like bullying, the one of the third host or something, and then he walked off or something. So
Uh-huh.
they won the battle because they it was a back and forth vocal sparring, and he couldn't take it anymore, so he just withdrew, he surrendered, he lost the battle.
Yeah.
Um, but it's still not like necessarily a pure duel, a pure war, because really that's about like finishing off the other guy. I mean, okay, it's similar. It's he's still around, and maybe he'll make a comeback. I guess that's war too. Yeah, it's definitely very similar,
Hmm.
and it's shifted, but the stakes are much lower.
Yes, for
Mhm.
sure.
So speaking of techniques and methodology,
Hmm.
so just we'll touch upon, when waging war, it started with just everyone waving sticks, and then, you look at monkeys, they just kind of chase after each other. I was watching some documentary about this, Chimp Empire or something, and they're like, they just start beating a guy, they ambushing, so they're ambushes. Then there were big organized armies that the Romans came along. Well, I guess before that, bow and arrows. That was um, a big revolution in war. The Huns, they were on horseback, and now you could like shoot people with bow and arrows. And like if you're standing with spears, then it's all over. And then you have formations. That's like more the Roman Empire. They work together. So now even if you're on horseback and you have cavalry, you can get in a line with pikes, and then if the cavalry charges, then you
Hmm.
just together you could form a shield against this, and then you have outflanking the other and outthinking. You have Napoleon Wars where he like lured them onto the ice or something, and then there's just all of these strategies when it comes to war, and there's like a whole school of thought. You have Sun Tzu's The Art of War,
Hmm.
um, how to think about your enemy, and I think he says crush your enemy till the end, no mercy, because that's how you win. You don't, and obviously the more um, the correct or more successful strategies are going to be those that actually win wars. And then so they're really testable. They're very empirical methods. They're always changing, of course, as technology improves.
Hmm.
Um, but there's all of this, how to think about your enemy, and like cut off his supply chains. That's vital. That's economically, you have to attack that as well. So there's just books and books about different, like saying a lot of similar things, but how to approach it, because it's just always changing, especially nowadays. Um, in the past century, it's radically changed. Guns came along, that changed everything. But now, then World War II, the last cavalry charges happened. You had tanks, giant,
There were cavalry charges in World War II.
I think so. I think they lost, but there's still some generals still stuck on the same strategies.
Uh-huh.
That's also a common thing in war. Just you have the school of thought that one general adheres to, and then boom, he loses because he's not always keeping up um, with with the current strategy.
Yeah.
And then airplane air superiority changes everything, and then nuclear warfare, boom. Everyone thought that, well, that's the end of war. We're not going to be able to. Who's going to attack each other now that we all have nukes, or that there are nukes, or powers, superpowers that have nukes? No one's ever going to go to war with them.
Mhm.
Well, that's clearly not the case.
Well, there's a grain of truth to that.
Grain of truth that maybe, well, I don't know. What would you say is the grain of truth?
The grain of truth is that war has reduced since the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Wartime deaths worldwide have certainly
Hmm.
gone down from, you know, let's say 1950 to now versus 1800 to 1950.
Hmm. For sure. There's definitely been a decline in casualties from war,
Hmm.
which is sort of that's a positive thing. It always seems like nowadays, oh, there's just more conflicts always raging, and you know, no end in sight, and we're on the precipice of a nuclear war or something.
Yeah,
But if we look at trends, it's gone down.
yeah. There's a lot of anxiety with nuclear weapons for sure.
Hmm.
Although I'm sure there was a lot of anxiety with regular war too. But
But the ability to obliterate millions of people at once.
does reduce the tendency for nations to go to war, I think.
Hmm. So I thought you were going to say, oh, no one will like the no one will ever really go to war with a nuclear nation now, or it will never lose a war, or they'll never dismantle a nuclear capable nation. I was going to say, well, South Africa gave up its nukes.
Mm.
America uh, is always fighting wars, not necessarily on its own soil, but Russia nowadays in Ukraine is fighting a war that is basically on its own soil. They lost land from Kursk, which was in Russia proper. It's taken over by Ukraine.
Hmm. But there's a like going to war is one thing, right? It's nuclear weapons are not going to prevent war entirely, but in the case of Ukraine and Russia, for example, there's obviously a limit to how far Ukraine can push because Russia has nuclear weapons, and this is just obvious. Now, if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, maybe there would be a practical limit because of Russia's capabilities. But if we were to ignore the practical limit for a second, you know, in theory, if Ukraine was able to push and push and push into Russia, they would maybe continue to do so. But with Russia having nuclear weapons, there's just Ukraine is going to, maybe take a little bit of territory. If this is all hypothetical, of course, I have no
Hmm.
idea what's going on in the Ukraine-Russia war, but like hypothetically, they might take a little bit of territory, but they're just going to try to kind of um, maintain their position, and they're not going to want to push very far into Russia because they don't want Russia to feel threatened to the point of, okay, well, now we're going to nuke you.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a line that they want to toe, that if they take too much land, like you said, I I I think they would use it as leverage. I don't think I think the Ukrainians are um, strong-minded enough that they wouldn't be as hesitant as you're making it sound, because if you think about it, they're on some level they're being destroyed. Their cities are being destroyed, so to them, you know, their whole country is kind of getting destroyed. I mean, it's obviously not on the scale of a nuclear bomb, but to them, the risk is not maybe as great as to us. We're thinking, we see this outside and we say, oh, obviously Ukraine can't risk, they're going to risk everything. They're already, in a sense, risking everything. Obviously, not to the level of nuclear
Mm.
annihilation, but my point is just that they're upset, they're pissed, and as a collective, or the generals up, they'll push, and it'll hopefully it would get to the point where Russia says, okay, you guys are on the outskirts of Moscow. If you don't stop now, we're gonna nuke you. And then Ukraine says, okay, let's figure this out. We're gonna have a ceasefire.
Hmm.
That's it, and the war. So yeah, that's the theory. And thankfully, we've never, gotten to the point where there's a nuclear war, true nuclear war. And if we we wouldn't be around to talk about it, which is the anthropological principle. Like it could be, there maybe are many other realities where we did nuke ourselves to death. And we
Interesting.
just happen to be living on, or many other planets that didn't get past the nuclear threshold and continue to survive. And we're here on our chairs saying, "Haha, obviously no one would ever go to nuclear war. That's stupid."
Hmm.
But maybe we wouldn't be able to say that on this podcast and laugh about it if we did go to nuclear war.
Hmm. Interesting. But it's not an all or nothing thing, right? Although we have talked about this on a previous episode. In theory, you could have a few nuclear bombs go off and not the whole world gets destroyed, and you still have people around sitting here saying, "Hey, nuclear bomb went off on the other side of the world. Doesn't affect me, but that's pretty wild." But
Right.
we don't have that either.
Right. Yeah, we don't have instances where one nuclear bomb went off and the other side said, "Okay, we'll stop it here. We'll accept the loss." In Japan, they didn't have nukes to fire back. Uh, there were some close calls in over the course of the Cold War between Russia and or the USSR and America, where there's a nuclear submarine on the Russian side that thought that they were getting depth charges dropped on them, and they thought that their loss of contact with Moscow meant that the nuclear war had happened, and two people aboard, two of the commanders were ready to fire, and the third one didn't.
Mm.
There were also airplanes carrying nuclear warheads that it crashed in South Carolina or North Carolina, I think, and it didn't. There's one switch that prevented the nuclear bomb from going off,
Whoa.
and
These were American warheads.
yeah, in that case, in North Carolina,
Uh huh. Wow.
and other close call incidents. And we have to wonder, like, okay, what would have happened? What would the chain of command have thought? Like, because when a nuclear bomb goes off, the heads of the country or whatever, the president has to make a split decision because you know either this is a real nuclear war or it's an accident. If it's a real nuclear war, then from just looking at like thinking about it or the game theory aspect of it, the other side knows that you're going to send nuclear warheads back in retribution, so um, it's in their benefit to just
Completely annihilate you
completely
now.
annihilate you from the get go.
Hmm.
So the president has like 5 minutes to decide, like let loose all the warheads or not. Was this an accident or not? Would they really just send a single nuclear bomb, or would it be everything? Am I going to end the world or not? So if then if he sends all of his arsenal, then the other side sends all theirs. Then there's enough nuclear radiation just in the atmosphere to send up enough dust that creates a blanket of cloud and dust, and then the sun can't get in, and then there's a runaway greenhouse effect, and then there's another ice age, and everyone over the whole world suffers because of this, and billions die, and then everyone's left to, you know, a few thousands maybe survive, and you have to rebuild the planet and everything. So
And maybe that already happened.
maybe, yeah, or maybe on some other planets. I don't know.
Mm.
Um, but like you were saying, how would someone react? And I look at on a smaller scale, we could look at how big attacks um, have been um, like seen throughout history. Let's say, I don't know, Pearl Harbor, September 11th, October 7th. Usually, the other side takes like these are huge attacks, but they take their time to respond.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we also saw this with the escalation, the tit for tat with Israel and Iran, the back and forth of attacks back and forth. So I don't know that if a nuclear bomb actually went off, if they would just go, boom, let's launch everything.
Yeah. Because maybe it's like at the end of the day, it's more important that you remain alive, I think, than that your enemies die. I think most people feel that way, right?
Well, I don't. If you're the president and a nuclear bomb goes off in New York City, boom, 10 million people dead. The economy is going to take decades to recover, if ever. Um, you're going to be seen as the president that this happened under.
Uh-huh.
Everyone is calling for blood. This country's at war. Okay, you don't have time to know, like, was it an accident? Who was it? Which country is responsible? Do we launch all the nukes back and then they launch their nukes and then we suffer even more damage? If you're the president, it depends on your temperament. It depends on, there some people on that nuclear submarine where some officers were like, let's do it. Another one said, what if I don't want to be the one that ends the world and is responsible for it? And the other officers were like, well, we don't want to be the ones responsible for not doing it.
Well, so in the case of the Cold War, it's actually a little more remarkable than the case that we're thinking about nowadays, because I think the United States and Russia were the only powers with nuclear weapons, at least for a time. Isn't that right?
Uh, in the Cold War, by then, Britain had developed,
Okay.
France, I think, um, uh, maybe South Africa.
Okay. But so the other thing is that if a nuclear missile or a bomber dropping a nuclear bomb were to appear and a nuclear bomb were to go off on American soil or on a submarine or whatever,
In a big populated city or like in the middle of nowhere? We're assuming a big
not the middle of nowhere as if it was like a test run, but at least some sort of.
or an accident. Like it'd be more clear it was an accident if it was in the middle of North Carolina.
Yeah, that's true. Because why would they target North Carolina? Yeah, but the point is, yeah, if it was a populated area, let's say, the point is that in that scenario, something like 60, 70 years ago, the U.S. president knew who did it,
Hmm.
assuming it wasn't America themselves, right? Right, maybe he gets on a quick war room call with his generals, and they all say, no, no, definitely wasn't a misfire or an accident or something we set off, and then he knows exactly who did it in that scenario,
Hmm.
and
Well, I guess, yeah. Nowadays, we wouldn't know if it was North Korea or China or Iran because,
yeah, I would say there's at least more complexity nowadays. I mean, so many more powers have nuclear weapons, and I mean, especially actually when there's no immediate right. In the Cold War, it was like, okay, there's we're both kind of pointing our nukes at each other. The Soviet Union has
thousands.
thousands, has made it fairly clear they would like to maybe nuke us. But now it's like, okay, we know that there are some powers that are hostile to the United States, but we're not in a situation like that with anybody where there's like we think that anybody is even thinking of nuking us. So if a nuke does go off, it's immediately like because there wasn't anyone on our minds, it's more complex. It's like, well, who exactly was it?
Hmm. All right, that's fair. But I mean, I imagine how it will actually happen is, well, nowadays we're in like, America's in a proxy war with Russia, or the West is in a proxy war, Europe, um,
Right now?
right now
Uh-huh.
with Ukraine. So it's not direct contact, and Russia has, threatened. We call it, what's it called when they wave, something waving. But everyone kind of like says, they don't really mean it. So I wouldn't say it's, if it happens, it's out of complete nowhere. Um, but yeah, I think it would be more clear whether it was an accident or not. One of the things with the Cold War is at least both players were pretty rational, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, um, but they weren't religiously fundamental and zealots. They didn't see their own destruction, their own martyrdom as a good thing.
Mhm.
Um, they, eventually, thankfully, both sides sort of back down and they start to proliferate or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know if we could say the same thing if North Korea or something.
Yeah.
If there's any attack on them, like who knows? I don't know, because or if it was, let's say the Houthis got a hold of a nuke from Iran or something.
Mhm.
They don't. They've clearly demonstrated they don't care about martyring themselves.
Yeah.
They love it. They're excited for it.
Uh-huh.
Um, so what's interesting is that I would say nowadays it's kind of shifted to a mentality of let's just ignore that there are nukes and let's just fight like we did in the old days. Like let's just push that to the back of our minds. Let's still do war because we still want war, but let's just like pretend nukes don't exist.
Where do you see that?
Well, I see it with Russia and Ukraine.
Okay.
Because if Russia really wanted to win, they could just nuke uh, Kiev. If, but they still obviously want to go to war. If Israel wanted to win, I mean, like if they just wanted to get it over with,
Well, so let's focus on Russia for a second. Does Russia want to win in the sense of we won the war as in you are defeated, or does it want to win in the sense of we want to have Ukraine to ourselves?
um, I think they want Ukraine to themselves. So they don't want to rule over the ashes.
Yeah.
But still, if they feel that they're losing enough, if nowadays Ukraine just is, it's a war of attrition. Ukraine has a whole fleet of drones, suicide drones that they're just like launching and at Russian soldiers. Russia's not winning. It's possibly losing from an economic perspective. Ukraine's not necessarily winning either, but Russia's not winning. So if they wanted to win, if they actually felt like this is it, we have to win, then they would drop a nuke.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. But that I go back to you can still fight a war because of course there are consequences to dropping a nuke, right? Russia doesn't necessarily want that heat on their shoulders from the rest of the world over dropping a nuke. They also don't necessarily want to, rule over the ashes of Ukraine. They'd like to
But you
rule
could
over.
say the same thing for America. Like if Russia nuked Kiev, would America really say, okay, now we're gonna end the war and end the world and nuke Moscow?
Well, no, I don't think you nuke another country unless you were nuked yourself. But
So maybe they could get away with it.
well, there's it's not all or nothing. It's not as if because you weren't nuked you got away with it.
Right. There'd be severe sanctions,
Yeah,
isolationism,
yeah,
even more than there is now.
yeah.
But maybe they could still get away with it.
Well, I don't know what you mean by get away with it.
Like ultimately win the war and get around all the sanctions eventually.
Meaning, in the end, they would be
Right.
beneficial to them.
Right. It's just not a zero probability and zero reward, I think. Like there could be benefit to it from there, which is why I think they haven't ruled it out completely and not like other than just threatening.
You also there's the other thing we talked about the possibility of misfires, the possibility of thinking that maybe a nuke went off. You don't want to necessarily be a country that every other country thinks you are happy with the nuke trigger,
Right.
because then if a mistake does happen later, you're gonna get nuked because some country's gonna be like, well, that looks like a nuke to me. It's probably Russia again because they nuked Ukraine.
But you'd have to be a trigger happy country to just
to
nuke them back.
Well, we established that it is complex whether you nuke back, even if you haven't had precedent that they have nuked you before, or not nuked you before. They have nuked somebody before,
Hmm.
right? It's complex. Do you nuke back or not? It's not simple.
Right.
It gets more simple when you saw them nuke somebody before.
Hmm. All right. So yeah, the future is going to be interesting because, like we said, nukes are complex. They're not necessarily the future of war. War still continues. Now it's all about like Trojan warfare. Hiding the drones in a truck and then having spies inside the enemy country and then having them launch them, taking out the air force. And it's just air superiority versus like drones and like obviously there's still having crazy proxies terrorists is still like a good strategy because they're it's hard to get rid of them, hard to dissuade them. um, but it definitely looks different war than how it used to be. Now I've heard that there are a lot more civilian casualties proportionally
Now,
nowadays, which I was a little shocked to see that because obviously in World War II, I mean, there's the Holocaust.
yeah,
Um, and there are other like genocides of other genocides.
Hmm.
I think though, in the past there used to be a battlefield. It used to be, okay, we're gonna meet there at in the morning. We're gonna like yell at each other, and then we're gonna go to war and start killing each other. Nowadays, you have, you're fighting in cities. Um, you're fighting with your military. A lot of your military structure is located within like the country itself or within cities. You have to have people working there. They have to have a place to live. It's not just uh, bases. It's not just and there's a whole military doctrine about especially for Israel. Let's say it's all about taking the war to your enemy's territory. Keep it out of your own territory as much as possible.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's not always successful, but you can see that's how they wage war. Um, and it's just a lot. What do you think? Do you see that argument for how the proportion of civilians to soldiers dying is higher than it was in the past? Um,
That's what we're talking.
without like
That's what.
forgetting World War II.
Okay. So that's what we mean by proportional. The ratio of civilians to soldiers dying in war.
Hmm.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I would also add that like soldiers have a lot more protection,
Yeah.
um, and so there's a lot more defense mechanisms. They're in tanks, they're bulletproof jackets, bunkers.
Yeah.
Civilians have very little.
I wonder if it says more about the reduction of soldiers dying in war than it does about an increase in civilians dying in war.
Right, that's what I think it is. I think it's they're a lot more careful with soldiers nowadays. I mean, it still depends where. Like in Russia, it's just a big meat grinder, and no one's dying in Russia proper. No civilians are really. I mean, there are some drone attacks, but very little. Um, and yeah, World War II is just a massive. There's siege, but we don't. I don't know. We don't see sieges nowadays, which is weird. Like sieges back then when you surround a
We
city and then kill everyone inside, take them all enslave them.
there was a
There's a lot more
there
to
there
that.
was a moment where people thought we were about to see a siege of Israel and Gaza. After October 7th, I heard discussion about maybe Israel waits a while before going in. You just keep your troops on the border. You just keep up a blockade. You you cut off the electricity. And I was thinking that sounds a little it's like it makes me think of back in the Roman Empire. It sounds a bit barbaric to like kind of like just slowly beat down your opponent through a siege. Um, it does seem a little more honorable to actually go in. At least put your life on the line if you're gonna
Hmm.
fight a war against somebody.
I would argue that it still is a form of siege because they can't. I don't know. No other countries are really helping them out or to escape, or they won't take any refugees.
Hmm.
So they are surrounded. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, they're. It's not just waiting them out. I would say.
Yeah.
But it's
Although,
not like they're cutting off their supply lines, of
right.
weapons, but they are sending them humanitarian aid. It's like a siege. It's like a Roman siege, but where you like throw over food,
Uh huh.
um, but also attack them at the same time.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
send in the legions.
Hmm. But obviously civilians suffered a lot more when it came to sieges. So it's like the fact that more civilians proportionally are dying today is like the level of cruelty. We don't people they don't get enslaved nowadays and butcher every. I mean, depends where, but we don't see that as much as in the past. It was just like a natural thing. Like obviously you do that if you know end your enemy's line. You don't want them coming after you, and obviously if you don't kill every single one of them, they're gonna want their revenge.
Yeah.
Where it's like it's your right to enslave them and take them. That's the natural thing to do.
You won.
You won. You get the spoils. You get the. That's just how humans acted for a long time.
Hmm.
Now it's there's a lot more sticky morality in the way.
Hmm.
So I want to ask you, um, is it inevitable? Is war just a natural thing?
Oh yeah.
Can there be? Can the world just exist with different countries without war?
I like this question. I saw it on your notes and I liked it. So war is, in a certain sense, inevitable because it is such a natural part of human beings and reality. We talked about kind of a war instinct, a primal fight instinct that is kind of at the heart of war in a fundamental sense. Um, and there's no really getting around that. So like I don't think history could have occurred without war. And of course, you look at history and it's filled with war. Um, when you think about the world that we live in, it seems, in a sense, inevitable that war would have occurred in it. Now, that's not the same thing as saying that war will always occur. If we look to the future, I do not think that war is inevitable. I actually think that the world is slowly progressing toward a state of lasting world peace. We're not there yet, but I do think that that is the trend in human history, not a perfectly monotonically increasing linear trend, but a with dips.
What do you think that's due to?
Whoa. What do I think that's due to? Perhaps there's a poetic religious way of thinking about it, that this is the path that God has us all on, that we are getting to a messianic end of days that includes no war, but through kind of a natural, gradual process. Um, if you want a different type of answer.
Yes.
Wait, so what was your question?
Why, in your opinion, do you think that we're just converging to a world peace?
Yes. So I would have to draw inspiration from the Veritasium video that I just watched in preparation for this. Pretty well known video on YouTube. It has a lot of views, so maybe people listening to this have seen it. I think it's titled "What Game Theory Has to Say About War
And conflict.
and Conflict," something like that. Veritasium. It's a Veritasium video. And so, so the kind of rational game theory explanation as to why we are headed towards greater peace is that.
Well, do you want to describe the
The video
because
first?
it's pretty interesting.
Okay, yeah, it's a very interesting video. Um, it it basically starts with describing the prisoner's dilemma, which is a hypothetical scenario where you have two prisoners. You separate each of them, and you say to each of them, am I already messing
If
it up?
you confess, like tell them each privately, if you confess, then you will go free. Or no, you'll only have to serve 1 year, and the other guy will have to
No,
serve 5.
that is if if you confess and the other guy
Doesn't.
doesn't. The other guy maintains his innocence, but you confess. You will serve.
To a crime that you both did, meaning
Yes.
you're both caught. Yeah.
It was easier when they were just getting some arbitrary number of points.
Right.
uh, basically,
But it's more intuitive when it's
getting a number of years. So if you confess and he doesn't, you will get, let's say, 10 years in prison, and he'll go free.
no.
No?
If you not confess, but like sell the other guy out.
Okay, that's what you mean.
If you sell him out, then they'll say, okay, you confessed, you owned up to it. You'll go free, but usually it'll be like you'll get 1 year because that's more reasonable. The other guy will get 5 years. And the same works for the other guy. If you both own up to it, then all of a sudden you both get 10 years because you both, you said you did it, and then there's no benefit to the investigator, to give you anything for confessing. And if neither of you confess, then you both go free. Something along those lines.
Well, it has to be that if neither of you confess, you don't get as much as you would if you were to rat out the other guy and the other guy didn't rat out you.
Okay. So if neither of you confess, they hold you both for 1 year each because on suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
If you rat the other guy out, you get 0 years
There you go.
as a reward. The other guy gets 5.
Yeah.
So your incentive, technically, the equilibrium, the Nash equilibrium, which just means the optimal state, is that you both
Rat out the other guy.
no, that you both collaborate. You
Oh,
cooperate,
the
and
long
you
term,
don't. Yeah,
the long term equilibrium.
right. The long-term equilibrium is
Yes,
that you both cooperate, even though, like,
but
you only get one year. So because you
right,
still get 1 year.
yeah. But you have to, I think, first talk about the short term. You have to talk about the isolated equilibrium first. I think.
Mhm.
At least that's like kind of a progression of thought about it. Meaning, if we were to assume that this is the only time this is going to happen in your life,
Okay.
uh, so what is the optimal decision? So, of course, you can intuitively try to say anything you want, but logically speaking, the rational decision is to be as self-interested as possible, is to rat out the other guy. Because if he doesn't rat out you, you gain the most by ratting out him. You go free. You don't have to serve anything.
Right.
If he rats out you, well, you're going to get 10 years if you don't rat out him, and he's going to go free. So you at least should reduce that and get only, I don't know, what did we say, 5 years, 3 years? So if he rats out you, you should rat out him. And if he doesn't rat out you, you should definitely rat out him because you're going to go free. So, like, either way, ratting him out is the best decision for you.
Hmm.
You're going to,
Right. Okay. Yeah, I remember now. If right, your options are either rat him out, get 0 years, collaborate hopefully, and get 1 year, or you both rat each other out. And you all get 5 years.
okay.
Correct. And so from just looking at all you care about is yourself, assuming. And the best outcome for you is to rat the other person out and get
Yeah.
0 years, because rather than get because if you don't rat him out, you're going to get either 1 or 5. But you know that he's thinking the same exact thing. And so he's definitely going to rat you out.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, you should both, um, you'll wind up both ratting each other out and getting 5 overall.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning,
But you know,
you
oh, sorry.
hopefully know
Sorry, go
that,
ahead. Keep going.
I mean, so yeah, you're kind of stuck because if you don't rat him out, you're gonna get, that he's gonna rat you out, and you're gonna get 5 years
Yeah.
because it's in his best interest. So,
I'm pretty sure the math checks out that if it's a one-time thing, it is the best decision to be selfish.
mhm. Maybe we should get like the actual numbers because I
Yeah, no,
forget.
yeah, it's hard to keep track in my head. Yeah, you pull it up, whatever. There are different variations on it, but
Right. Um, so if both cooperate, then they receive a minor punishment, 1 year in jail. If one cooperates, the other defects. The defector goes free, while the cooperator receives a severe penalty. Um, and if both defect, then each receives a moderate punishment. So two
yes,
years in jail.
yes. Defect means rat out the other guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So the dilemma is, from each individual's perspective, confessing is the dominant strategy. If the other suspect remains silent, then confessing leads to freedom instead of a year in jail. If the other suspect confesses, confessing still results in a shorter sentence, 2 years instead of 4, because you both confessed. So even though like the average there is 2 and or freedom, those are both your options. Um, it still is the case that if both suspects act rationally based on this logic, they both end up with a worse outcome, uh, the 2 years in jail, than if they had both cooperated in the 1 year in jail.
Yes, and we can't do a kind of assuming we're still on this one incident where this is happening. We can't continue the thinking. Right? That is the equilibrium. We can't say like, oh, but now I know that we both know this, and so why don't we just cooperate? Because as soon as one person makes that move to cooperate, the other one says, all right, great, I'm going to confess. I get much more. So then the other guy says, okay, I'm not cooperating. I'm going back to confessing. So it always the two sides always get back to ratting each other out, confessing, and if any one of them starts trying to say, "Hey, why don't we instead cooperate?" the other one will just confess. So it doesn't get away from that.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's also a fun game like of Split or Steal, which is the same exact thing, where two contestants would have to split the money. And if they both cooperated, they could split it. But if one does steal and the other does split, then the guy who does steal gets everything. If they both steal, they get nothing. And so they would both try to convince each other, oh, let's do split. But they know that if they actually think the other guy is going to split, then they should steal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if they both think about it like that, then they're both going to do steal and they're both going to lose everything.
Yeah.
So they actually should cooperate. So yeah.
Yeah.
So why did we bring this up?
Well, so we're explaining the Veritasium video.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, so he brings up the prisoner's dilemma. He explains that the equilibrium is where both prisoners rat each other out. But then he starts talking about if we were to repeat this game over time, do things change? And he also explains very appropriately that repeating the game over time is actually much more it resembles real life much more because
if you have two sides, fighting a war, like on the one hand, if they both cooperate and stay at peace with each other, then over time that's the best. We assume that's mutually beneficial.
exactly.
If both sides go to war, they both lose out. But if one side goes to war and like realizing the other side is weak or something, if they do a first strike,
Uh-huh.
then they stand to gain.
They stand to gain now, but if we really look long term, they won't be able to have as good of relations with other nations. There are long term consequences to striking now and being selfish, and even if in the short term you can take something for yourself. So if we focus just on the prisoner's dilemma, if we were to play if I were to play the game with just one other person over and over again, eventually we would actually reach a point where we're both cooperating with each other because right, we'd play it once and we would both rat each other out, and we'd both see like, okay, we got the suboptimal situation, now we're going to do it again. Maybe we'll do the same thing. All right, so again we got the suboptimal situation. We're starting to like, but if I know, right, and it has to be a case where it's not a closed amount of time. So like I can't know that it's going to be 5 times or 6 times, right? It has to be completely open ended. Like, oh, this is going to go on for who knows how long. So once I know that it's going to go on for who knows how long, well, like, all right, I mean, maybe I'll just then cooperate this time in the hopes that he will start cooperating with me. This time that I'm cooperating, I'm going to lose a lot. But I know that I'm playing the long game now, right? This is a long term thing. So I'll cooperate. Maybe he'll take advantage of me, but he'll see that I cooperated. So let's see what happens next time. Maybe I'll cooperate again, and he'll take advantage of me. But then I'll go back to ratting him out, and he'll see, he went back to ratting me out. I'm no longer getting what I could have gotten by taking advantage of him. I'm back to getting this very suboptimal situation where we both get a little bit. Now, so we both start to get it eventually, and eventually we
you change your strategy.
Yeah.
So we're talking about your strategy and like both sides could continue losing if they both decide their strategy is to just keep fighting, to keep trying to take advantage of the other side. But if you have a tit for tat strategy, as they say, then like you described, you want to change up you say, okay, maybe now let's try cooperating. And if he responds positively, then you say, okay, yeah, we're going to start cooperating now. We're just going to do split every time. But if he responds with steal, then you say, oh, that's not going to fly. I'm going to do steal on the next time. And so what you wind up with is if you have a whole bunch of different agents with different strategies, those that always try to take advantage of you and never cooperate, well, they're never going to win anything. They're just going to keep, suboptimally competing with you, and you both you don't get the optimal. But those that do want to cooperate with you, you start doing better with them, and overall, you as the agent with the tit for tat strategy do the best across all of these different agents with their different strategies.
Exactly. So
even if you have an agent that just always cooperates, you're also going to do well with him. He's not going to do as well with other agents that always take advantage of him.
Right. So yeah, it's a very cool video that kind of mathematically with computer simulation shows what seems to be this very profound insight into reality, into conflict, relationships, into the natural world, which is that there's kind of this emergent ethic of be kind but don't be a pushover, and that is right. We kind of think of that as like, yeah, that's being a pretty good person, like be a good person, but if somebody tries to take advantage of you, don't let them do that. Like that's kind of like we kind of intuitively understand that as like, yeah, that's being a pretty solid individual. But it also turns out that that is the way to win the most in life, in the world. That is the most winning strategy in this whole game of competition in nature or wherever.
Hmm.
It's really cool.
Yeah. And we could look at a few, I don't know, a few modern examples. If we were to look at America, let's say,
Hmm.
which is, arguably is still the world superpower, and um, they have a lot of its power comes from cooperation with countries that want to cooperate. They all want to, they wants to expand if it can through economic prosperity, but it's not going to be a pushover. Looking at I don't know, Canada, for example, it doesn't spend as much as the U.S. does, which is $50 billion a year on military.
Hmm.
Um, so its only strategy is cooperation.
Uh-huh.
And so, if not that anyone's going to war with Canada necessarily, other than, I don't know, maybe Russia or something, but it's not necessarily, it could be pushed around. Um, Israel has a lot of, it definitely, it's not an isolationist state at all. It's trying to bridge as many things economically as possible, but if it's attacked, uh, it does not hesitate to go to war. Unlike, like even America now, America is war wary. They don't. The war is very unpopular.
Hmm.
The Israeli mentality is not to be pushed around. If you look at the Houthis, yeah, they're not. They don't want to be. They don't get pushed around either. They are going to fight back, but their cooperation is also not. They're not open to cooperation.
Yeah, um, exactly. There are four attributes, four characteristics in the video that this game theory simulation seems to conclude are the four characteristics of a winning strategy. One is to be nice. And in this simulation, it meant don't take advantage first. Don't attack first. Right? Cooperate until the other person attacks. So that's what being nice is in there. And then two is to be forgiving, which is that if somebody you know defects, if somebody rats you out, um, well, I'm going to get to retaliation as the third characteristic, but don't hold a grudge for too long, right? Get him back once, maybe twice, but tit for tat is once. But don't hold it. Don't continue to rat him out for the rest of days. Like
Hmm.
forget about it eventually. Forgive. So be nice, be forgiving. Three is be retaliatory. Don't be taken advantage of. So if somebody rats you out, you rat him out on the very next move. Um, that's tit for tat. But any strategy that incorporates some sort of retaliation that is uh, following that characteristic. And the fourth one is to be clear, which is an interesting one because you have to let your intentions or let the way you operate be able to be discerned by other people so that they can know how to work with you, right? If you're acting in such a erratic way that it's essentially random, then other people don't know how to work with you, right? They don't know what you're going to do, so they don't know if they can trust you. They don't, right? Tit for tat, it's very predictable. It's very okay. If you hit me, I'm going to hit you back. But other than that, we can cooperate. So then the opponent knows, hey, I can trust you. I know that if I don't hit you, I know you're not going to hit me. So that's how we know to cooperate because there's a we know what to expect.
Hmm. Yeah, looking at, for example, Syria nowadays, there's we have al-Shara or al-Julan, formerly al-Julani, and he's looking to he's like, oh, the war's over. We're now he's now in power. He was strong when he needed to be to overthrow Assad, but now he's ready for cooperation. But a, a lot of things holding him back, and that there's still a lot of today. There's a lot of violence. A lot of his militias are attacking Druze minorities in the country, and it's very unclear. He used to be Al Qaeda, so there's a lot of distrust here. We don't know what he really wants. Is he like hiding underneath it all? Is this a strategy? So
Mm.
even if you put out your hand in cooperation, if it's not clear, then we don't know what you really want, or just in general, like if you're shooting randomly, if you're not making your demands clear,
Uh,
then it's just impossible to collaborate,
yeah.
and you just interpret everything as
Hostile.
hostile.
Yeah.
We could look at we could also look at India, Pakistan. Um, that's
Just before we continue with that, I just want
yeah,
to, because we asked a very profound question
right.
and we just answered it. I just want to loop it back to make sure that we know that we just answered it. You asked, or I said that war is in a sense inevitable in the sense that like it must occur in nature, but as time goes on, it's not inevitable and we're headed towards a state of peace. And you asked why I think that or how we know that, and I think that this insight in game theory that shows that being peaceful is actually a winning strategy as long as you retaliate when attacked. But once everyone understands that, then no one will attack because we all know that we all are gaining by cooperating. We're all gaining by cooperating. As soon as somebody says, "What's all this cooperation? I'm gonna start taking advantage of people," well, then he gets attacked by people because the ethic is to retaliate. So that's how we get to a eventual state of peace.
hmm And I will say that our methods of communication have increased vastly um, with modern technology. We know what happens when it happens. I mean, as a lot better than in the past.
Hmm.
I'd say that the benefits of cooperating do nowadays outweigh those of not cooperating. In the past, having a world economy that's based off of trade, and like it was a thing, but it wasn't as clear. If you were powerful, just go and take what you want, take the slaves, take the resources.
Yeah.
You don't have a Nasdaq to prove mathematically. You don't have people, studying business administration to actually make this happen. So that's another reason why I'd say it's growing.
Yeah.
Um, resor- we're not as scarce. The scarcity of resources isn't as bad. People are not starving as they used to be
Right.
overall. But I'll still say this. I I think a lot of countries will see, you know, it used to be that the lines on the maps of what defined the countries were a lot more fluid. Countries change, and in some places a lot less slower. There's still conflicts, but I think countries that will say, "Why am I limited? Like, why is this it?" So they'll look at America, um, how large it is, and its population is growing, and what it has, and they'll say, "What? I'm supposed to just if you're China, I'm just supposed to stay within my borders and just let my population get larger and larger, and the scarcity of food get worse and worse every year." Um,
Well, hold on. Does the scarcity of food get worse and worse every year?
if your population's growing. But
Well, I don't know if that's true. C-
okay, fine. Let's say it's not, but just as a matter of pride, if like okay, let's say it's this food's not scarce, you're able to do with what you can, but let's say in America you're able to own entire ranches,
Yeah.
just the wealth is so much higher. So it's not so maybe famine's not a thing, but just the difference in wealth is enough to spur governments to say, "Hey, we want more." So like even if I don't know, fed all the starving countries, they'd still want to um, they won't be happy until everyone has the same amount of wealth. China wants to invade Taiwan because it's sitting right there. So be it. Who cares about the sanctions? It's worth it. Like because ultimately, like we'll pay a price, but then we'll have all of the semiconductor technology of Taiwan and so much more power in the future. So we'll pay the price, and that's what like Russia's thinking about Ukraine. Russia. has enough resources, they're plenty wealthy,
Mm.
they see the possibility to gain more. They they'll say, "Oh, screw the short-term loss. Let's take it over, and then it'll be worth it, and it'll pay off itself in 20 years."
Yeah. So I'm definitely not suggesting that war is over. There
Hmm.
will never be any more war. Um, you, of course, you know, the 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 ethic that I described that I got from the Veritasium video about mutually understood cooperation over time due to the consequences of conflict and attacking each other. Um, it certainly, I don't think it just happens. It just goes in a line upwards. It takes some twists and turns, I think, and the um, the motivation to attack can take all sorts of forms, right? So initially, I only viewed my opponent as another prisoner who might be getting off or who might be getting time in prison. And I only calculated how I deal with him in those terms, that all he was to me was this other prisoner. But as,
Otherism.
sorry.
It's just us versus them.
Um, well, yeah, but that's not really what I was going for. I was going for that the framework in which I can either compete or cooperate with my opponent is very confined because I'm a I'm a prisoner, he's a prisoner. Like the parameters of the game are simple and limited. As we cooperate more, we start seeing a wider game, perhaps. Right? Let's say we understand the whole prisoner's dilemma thing at this point. We're doing this thing.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, but let's say the two of us are in some simulation for eternity where we're in the prisoner's dilemma, and we get it at this point. We're going to cooperate with each other. We know that that's what gives us the best outcome. But then we start seeing a wider game, right? Then we start saying like, what? Well, can we now get out of the prison? Or even if we can't get out of the prison, what about like my general quality of life within my cell? I don't know why we're still in the cell, even though we're playing the prisoner's dilemma for eternity. But whatever. The point is that you start thinking about other things. Like, okay, so I got that whole thing squared away. Like we know what to do to get the best outcome in this framework in this game. But now, how do I get a better outcome in a wider game? Will that result in conflict with you because our interests are once again not aligned, once again irreconcilable? Um, so I think so. Maybe there's a limit to how wide the game can get, and even as kind of a vision of equality emerges, as we all start becoming more and more peaceful, then we start saying to ourselves, well, why does this person have more than I do? Yeah, I get it. Like we're being peaceful because like we don't, I understand that if I attack you, you're going to attack me back, and it's going to be not in my benefit long term. But still, this kind of sucks. Like, still like you have much more than I do. So, does the game widen, right? Does it become that, wait, maybe cooperation, maybe we all actually benefit from being equal? I don't know that that's the case. And I'm not sure what being equal means. Um, but I don't know if I've made a clear point here, but
Sort
that's.
of. I mean, I thought you were going one direction. But I see maybe what you mean is that like even that aspect of inequality, um, the other side, which is wealthier, will see this and say, "Hey, we don't want them going to war with us. We should do something about try to redistribute the wealth, if that sounds kind of communist
Yeah,
and socialist." Uh, from game theory, it would seem like that's sort of some sort of cooperation on some level to make sure that they don't feel this too much, you know.
right. It's
Um,
possible.
and I was also going to say, like, uh, what you were saying about the parameters changing, how it's like, it's assumed in the prisoner's dilemma that you're completely independent, that you don't know anything about him. All you know is that you either, you know, confess or cooperate.
Hmm.
But nowadays, with the increase in education, we know that when other people are exposed more to other people, they learn more about them. They can they say, "Hey, you know, you're not so different." And you know,
Yeah.
we haven't touched upon the religious fundamentalist ideology aspect of war. But that's a lot of it. A lot of it is like, uh, I'll call them preachers. It doesn't have to be religious. You know, you could have politicians who are basically preaching the religion of ideology,
Mm.
of us versus them, and they are the heathens. They are the whatever communist capitalists. They're trying to take our land, whatever it is. And then there's religious fervor around war, and um, you want to like make sure that that people are exposed more to the other side. They know, hey, this person's just like me.
Mhm.
He has his own interests as well. He understands the downsides of war. The downside, he understands. You know, if I meet with him, if travel, globalization, education, like increases the clarity. Oh, I know what he wants now, and it's not so crazy to think that he doesn't want necessarily to destroy me. He wants to live in peace. So maybe we could find a resolution.
Yeah. And that's so the number one characteristic that comes up in the Veritasium video is be nice, which is just, which in that video means don't attack first. Um, and there's a kind of fundamental worldview that I think undergirds that, which is kind of believing in the best in people, or believing that people are essentially good, only if one of them proves to me that they're not being good to me am I gonna do anything to them. But barring that, I'm gonna be good to them because I believe they're essentially good. And it's possible that that fundamental worldview can kind of expand the more you see of another person. So even if somebody is attacking me, but I have additional knowledge that I know that it's because they like I fundamentally understand that they are well-meaning in some way, but they are just misguided about who I am, or they feel threatened in some deep way. Um, so that kind of ethic of be nice, meaning to say, don't initiate the conflict, can perhaps can perhaps expand further. Um, although you run into problems there because if you are no longer retaliating when you're attacked, then you lose
Mhm.
that tit for tat strategy, which is what allows you to win. But um,
And I would say that the natural state of humans is not is kind of just to assume everyone else is an enemy. I think that's like how we evolved as a species. If you met like another tribe in the wild, you'd start with a benchmark of they are out to get me.
mm,
So err on the side of caution.
yeah.
I think it takes a lot of education to unlearn that.
So, well, the way I would phrase it is, yeah, I do like the way you kind of made it about the, you have your tribe, and okay, this is we are the unit. We look out for each other. Everyone else is an enemy, and then you meet someone new from another tribe, and it's like enemy. We stand against you, um, and there is that, and I think that still does exist. It's just that the tribe has expanded and expanded and expanded, and perhaps enlightenment is realizing that we are ultimately all the same tribe when you understand what the tribe really is. So
Hmm.
it is true that like the tribe is sacred. Everyone else enemy.
So that doesn't stop being true.
It doesn't stop being true. It's
It's
just
the
that
concept of tribe
the tribe
has
is now
expanded.
all of humanity, perhaps.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Which leads in a bit to what I want to talk about next, which is how wars are resolved.
Ooh.
Uh, because on on one of them, I say, it's about loss of identity, and I'll get into that in a second. But just to list them off, how I think wars in general have been resolved throughout history, either a ceasefire where no final agreement has been reached, but it's mutually beneficial to just cut it off. So India, Pakistan, we saw, recent eruptions. They always go through rounds. Um, South Korea, North Korea, there's no formal relations between the two. They're still technically at war, but it's a cold peace. On
Mm-hmm.
the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
they just don't want to fight each other because they have too much to lose. Um, so it's always likely to erupt at some point. It could end alternatively with some sort of peace or agreements. So they say, okay, we both have something to lose. Let's cooperate instead of fighting. And it's interesting how this can be enforced by, how do you really hold someone to not like go to war again? Um, they, you could. I was thinking about it like sanctions or something that are just set to snap back. You could give each other like the passwords to your bank accounts. Like, oh, here, all of our gold deposits or especially digital assets. You can freeze those nowadays. In the past, like, I don't know how you enforce a peace agreement. Uh, if like, how do you say um, we're going to be at peace now? Because if you attack, we'll attack. So then you're just back to war again. So what? How do you keep that? So I think nowadays with the way the world is set up with sanctions, the UN, no, maybe the UN doesn't do anything, but you have organizations that between countries that have agreed to enact sanctions uh, if an agreement is breached. Um, and the third alternative is just unconditional surrender. So, one side is saying, okay, we're gonna fight till the end, and the other side is saying, we're gonna, okay, you're not gonna uh, come to a peace agreement. We're just gonna keep fighting until you surrender, because at some point it becomes in their advantage to. They have the advantage over the enemy. The enemy, despite seeing that they're at a disadvantage, they continue fighting.
Hmm.
Or it could just be because the other side is just so full of genocidal hatred, or they just like if it's the Romans, let's say, there's no such thing as like a peace agreement with some Germanic tribe and the Romans. It's just they're going to keep fighting until they die, and they take them slaves. So, but I would say in the case of World War II with America and Japan, Japan had the opportunity to come to some peace agreement, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
Uh, Obviously, it would probably be more in the favor of America, but they had the chance, and then but they were so ideologically fanatic that they refused until like the very end after the dropping of the atomic bombs, and then they just surrendered unconditionally. They said, "Okay, that's it."
So there was the dropping of the one atomic bomb, and of course America said to Japan, like, "Okay, surrender. Like you see what we have," and still they wouldn't surrender. And I think even after the second, I forget where I read about this, but I think even after the second, there was still resistance among the Japanese.
It was the emperor
Oh yeah,
that said, "Guys, this is too much."
yeah.
They believed in the divinity of the emperor as well,
Mm-hmm.
and that was shattered after World War II.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, because of the honor system as well, they said we're gonna fight till every last man, woman, and child. So there's this spectrum, where like they could have surrendered, I guess, earlier or come to some agreement saying we'll end the war, but they weren't doing that. They didn't want to end the war,
Yeah.
at least not in a position where they would lose all the land that they had captured in the Pacific or.
Uh-huh. I forget where I read this as well, but there was somebody, at least one Japanese soldier who got stranded somewhere,
Mhm.
and he remained thinking that he was at war for the next
40 years.
yeah, something like that. And
And when he was discovered, he's like, "Oh, I'm still fighting."
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
can't give you more details, but it was something like that.
Hmm. And the fourth option, which I was referencing at the beginning, is complete domination, where basically there there is no like official surrender. It's more like the Romans just taking over. They're not looking for any surrender or agreement. You surrender, they're still going to kill you.
Hmm.
Um, so that's a victor takes all. The other side just ceases to exist. They completely break them up. So that's like genocide, through death, the Holocaust, the native tribes of the Americas or Australia. I mean, still native tribes existed, but definitely a lot of them were
Well,
were just completely, but also through disease as well. Um,
yeah, 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 in concept,
in concept,
it is
in
an example.
concept,
It is an
yeah.
example. Yes.
Because nothing's like a complete, like very few cases have complete genocide, like to the last person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like some tribes, or back in the past, 2,000 years ago, 3,000, 2,000 years plus, there was just the world was comprised of little small tribes. I mean, even 2,000 years ago, they had empires and stuff.
Well,
But
yeah, more than
I'm
2,000.
thinking 3,000 years. As the tribes, the Roman Empire was 2,000 years ago, and in Europe at the time, there were all these small Germanic tribes that were like independent of each other.
Yeah.
Um, and um, um, and the thing is with the genocide of of these tribes is that the Romans would take that, they bring them in as slaves, but they would like breed with them, and they would like they'd fine kill all the men, but they would through breeding they would basically assimilate them, or keeping them as slaves. So
Mm.
as much, even though the tribes themselves ceased to exist, their attributes still found their way into the Roman Empire, because they had their culture, which they, whatever survived, some of it survived and was brought into their culture. So even as one empire grows, it takes on the attributes of everything around it.
In some ways, even when a culture is destroyed, it lives on in another.
Hmm.
It's actually quite difficult to completely destroy another culture.
Right. And the complete victory is also difficult, because you you wind up losing a bit of yourself as well.
Oh, wow, that's very crazy.
Yeah. So so that's why it was kind of what you were talking about, as the tribe gets bigger, the loss of identity. I mean, it's the opposite in a way, but just that that war will stop. Well, it's not the opposite in a way, because the Roman Empire, as terrible as it was, did bring um, good things through. As a result of killing all of these people.
What have the Romans ever done for us?
What have they ever done?
Well, there's yeah,
Yeah,
there's the roads.
the
Oh,
roads,
apart from the roads.
the plumbing.
Well, okay. Apart from the plumbing and the roads, what have the Romans ever done for us?
Exactly. Um, they united everyone, and uh, so that so peace ultimately did come from just increasing the concept of the tribe. So the way to peace is just increasing the concept of the tribe, whether it's through peaceful methods or war methods. The only way to peace is just like, okay, there's war through strength, through there's peace through strength, through war, the tit for tat, and there's peace through peace, and growing as a result of understanding each other.
Um, interesting.
Mhm.
But I wonder if you can only achieve that after tit for tat. Meaning, we can only achieve the lasting piece of like integration with each other. And I think we've seen this in history. As somebody who doesn't consider himself so knowledgeable in history, I can't give examples with details. But we've definitely.
I just want to say I think you are. Also to our listeners, I
Oh,
don't want to make it seem like
thank you, Benji.
we're talking about something we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Cal is very knowledgeable.
All right.
He's just
Thank
too modest.
Well, we'll see. Um, but yeah, like we've seen tribes that are at war for a long time, and kind of through war, they come to know each other in a way. Like we hate each other, but we also have come to, in a sense, love each other through our hatred of each other. And so you can be at war for a long time, and then eventually you do arrive at a peace that is one of real understanding. But it's because you were at war. It's because you went through that. It's as if the war was part of the relationship building between the two of you.
Hmm.
And so I don't think we can just kind of throw all people in the world together and we will all get along. The war is inevitable, but it's not inevitable forever. And through conflict with each other, we grow to understand each other in a deeper way. And we grow to want peace genuinely with each other after having fought with each other. whether that's even after complete annihilation, or even meaning it's almost as if the different resolutions of war that you talked about are kind of stages. So, ceasefire, that's early on, right? It can happen again. War can happen again. We haven't yet reached a full understanding of each other. We don't yet love each other.
Mm.
We're only in a ceasefire. Now, of course, complete domination. But in complete domination, you talked about integration as well.
Mhm.
So there's a kind of flip side to complete domination, which is that we just now become maybe
One.
peaceful integration instead of coerced integration.
Mhm.
Maybe.
So we could chalk that up as one of our answers to war. What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
It could be good for technically bringing people together in
Exactly.
an ironic sort of way.
Exactly.
I will say that, like, I mean, I'm trying to think of examples through history. There was, the Roman Empire. That was whatever. We spoke about that. I will say the ongoing conflict between, let's say, Israel and the Arab world or the Palestinians.
Yeah.
We definitely understand each other a lot more
Yeah.
and what each side wants.
For sure.
We still heavily disagree on it, but the more you're at war, the more you're like, oh, I get what you want.
You start to really understand somebody. Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, so I disagree. You really want, but I understand. Yeah, you really want to destroy us, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or you really want, this the land or whatever.
Right.
And even in Israel, Israelis have taken on certain attributes of, um,
The-
shawarmas and lafas and
For sure.
and
Khalas.
khalas. A lot of Arabic words, find their way into the Hebrew lexicon,
Absolutely.
and it works the other way around as well. They're um, different amounts, but obviously a lot more people are speaking Hebrew. A lot more Arabs are speaking Hebrew than they would have otherwise. And I know that, what's his name, the the guy, Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October 7th.
Uh-huh.
He became super proficient in Hebrew, learned all of the history of Israel about its political leaders. Because you have to know thy enemy.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's also a thing that I think that people completely outside of the Israel-Palestine conflict, they often kind of throw their hands up. They say like, "Oh my gosh, these two, they're fighting again. I don't know how they're ever going to find peace." Or maybe they just describe it as this cycle of violence between these two sides. I don't know how these two sides are ever going to reconcile. But you talk to a lot of Israelis. I don't know about. I'm sure there are Palestinians who say this. Maybe probably fewer, I would imagine. But there are. You talk to like Israelis in Tel Aviv. They'll often say something like, "Yeah, why can't we all just live? There's space for all of us. Like we don't even need the line." I mean, I don't believe this, but but I'm just showing that like it's something that Israelis I've heard Israelis say. I've never heard an American say this. Israelis might say something like, yeah, like, there's space for all of us. Like, we can have one state, or we can have one state that's like kind of two states, or we can have like, a sort of, why don't we'll all just be here. It's fine. Like, we get each other.
mhm. I thought you were going in a different direction. Because what I was gonna say is, when an outsider, like a classical American, looks in on the conflict, they say, "Oh, why can't everyone just get along? Why can't everyone just?"
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
kind of the
no.
opposite. There's so much land. Why can't they just get along with each other?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's still, in a sense, true what you're saying. But they actually, when you talk to them, people outside the conflict understand it the least.
Yeah.
They the Until you're there, you don't understand what's going on, and it's a little counterintuitive, because you think, oh, these people don't understand each other, that's why they're at war. I can help them understand each other because I understand, both. I'm as an outsider.
Right. But no,
When
yeah.
the truth is the opposite.
Yeah.
I look at other conflicts, India, Pakistan, or something. I just don't know as much about it. I like the ideology behind the fight. it's somewhere there. It's just it's foreign to me. To me, I just say, why can't they get along?
Uh-huh.
But obviously, that's like a naive approach,
Uh-huh.
um, because if I really want to know why they hate each other, I have to really speak to both sides.
Yeah. You have to really understand both sides, which is very difficult to do. It's hard to even understand one side truly when you're outside of it.
Mhm.
Um, so Benji, who is right in the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Oh, all right. We're ready to get there.
Are we there? I did think that was going to be a very interesting thing to discuss. I know
Mhm.
it's already we might have to do this in two parts, the war discussion, or not. But I'm happy to do who's right in a number of conflicts,
Mhm.
or what makes the morality of war and what makes somebody right.
Right. So, okay, we're going to continue. We'll say, okay, we finished a bit talking about war in general and the theory of war, um, the underlying structure of war.
Hmm.
Now we're going to get into like some more practical discussions,
Hmm.
and we're also going to discuss ethics in war.
Okay,
So,
we're going to do all of that right now.
all of it.
All right.
So, ethics. Is there really a less or more ethical way to kill a person?
Hmm.
Is all fair in war? Is it less noble to kill dozens at a wedding than thousands in combat?
Yeah, you said that's a quote from Game of Thrones. Where is that quote? Where does that?
Tywin Lannister, after the Red Wedding,
Uh,
he says, "Tell me, like I know it, like his son Tyrion was saying, how could you do that? Like, aren't there like line? Like, I know it's war and I'm all for cheating, but kill someone at his own wedding,
hmm.
like we have lines, but so." And then he says he did it for the family, whatever. But he says, okay, technically it saved lots of lives, and there's all of these. The Geneva Convention was established after World War One, I think, after the use of like mustard gas and chemical gas, because that was seen as like, oh, that's not a good way to kill a person. Um, so it's kind of like uh, absurd in a way
Yeah.
that we would care. Oh, it's fine, if you use metal bullets, but uranium shells or something that's stronger, or phosphorus, or napalm, those are inhumane. And like, how do like either way, you're killing the person. Is it just about torture? I mean, like, okay, fine, maybe if if you have a way to kill someone faster, that's less torture. Is that really bad? You could. It's still torture to get your stomach riddled with bullets, and then it'll take you hours to die while you're slowly bleeding out. I mean, that's not humane. So, what is it about this whole idea of rules in warfare? Is it ridiculous, or does it actually make sense? Does it help us like understand at the end of the day that war is like a an undesirable state of affairs, and we have to do our best, even if we're forced into it, and we have to do our best to stay humane despite it. So we can't outlaw war. Like, right, if you could just outlaw certain weapons, why not just outlaw war in general? Obviously, we can't do that, but we say, oh, okay, it's fine. Use weapons like guns if you have to, and bombs,
so
but not cluster bombs.
to be clear, it is possible to outlaw war.
No, but okay.
It is. It's impossible to enforce it.
Uh,
It'll just be words on a paper.
right.
And that begs the question, well,
How do you
are
enforce?
the other laws also just words on paper? What is international law exactly?
Hmm.
Right? Law within a country is enforced by the country itself. Um,
But like, it's kind of absurd to say war is illegal. If you go to war, then we're gonna go to war with you. You know, I
but
guess that's
yeah,
policing in general. Like, if you attack someone, then the police will attack you.
well,
But
no, there's a difference. I mean, yes, you can strike a similarity there, but I think there's a difference between policing versus combat, because
well, I meant like enforcing international law.
so wait, so there's a police force, there's an international police force, or it's that because you went to war with me, I'm in a sense policing international law, or enforcing international law by retaliating.
Or some external body. is going to back you up to police this war and tell everyone not to fight by, threatening both sides or something,
Okay.
or the aggressor.
Well, so I think the problem that we run into is that we don't end up really having. It's not as if you can write, you know, let's all have a happy and peaceful world into law. So you can outlaw war, or you can outlaw certain types of war, um, but doesn't necessarily capture what is right or what is necessary for nations to do in situations where they are up against hostile enemies. So if we offer ourselves a simple scenario where somebody just attacks somebody else unprovoked with the sole motivation to,
Steal the resources.
I was going to say, murder all their citizens. I was trying
Okay,
to make it,
murder others. Yeah,
yeah, I was going to murder all their
simple as
citizens
possible. Who didn't do anything?
who didn't do anything. Like, make it as one-sided and simple as possible. So then, yeah, we can imagine kind of an international body of some sort who would take the side of the non-aggressor in that situation. But of course, the world is very complex. So what often ends up happening with an international body is, like you have with the United Nations right now, right? The United Nations, in many ways, would like to be far more anti-Israel than it effectively is, but because you get, first of all, a there are problems with democracy. Let's be clear. The the majority is not always right. First of all, and also, just practically speaking, what you end up having with the United Nations is that it's still the case that the strongest country in the world basically runs the show. Like the United Nations can't do anything that's fully against what the United States wants. So,
Because
uh,
they have veto power, and so
yeah,
does Russia and China.
Russia and China also have veto power.
I think so.
Okay,
So
who
nothing ever gets passed
who gives these nations veto power? It's just that they have it. Right?
because they're the largest nations. When it was founded, this was like written in as one of the stipulations,
Oh,
and
really?
they also donate the most money.
Okay. So the point is, you end up with a kind of chaos of the jungle, even when you try to create a organized, utopia-driven international body. You still end up with the chaos of the jungle.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But then, okay, so why though can we not enforce making war illegal, but we can enforce making certain weapons illegal?
Well, that was my point. I don't think you can really
Uh,
enforce
s-
making certain. You can.
you
We
could
can.
try, but why do we try
Well,
one
because
and not the other?
there are some things that maybe enough strong nations in the world have kind of agreed
Hmm.
that, yeah, we're not fans of this, and when it happens we'll all kind of use our influence to help make sure it doesn't happen, or punish the people who are doing it, or even use our military force to punish the people who are doing it, depending on how egregious it is.
Hmm.
So it's just that because we're such a more global world and a more connected world, so there are things that, good people really disapprove of. So it's not as if like we made it illegal, even though we did, but it's not the illegality of it that is really what is stopping people from doing it. It's that there are enough good, strong nations that will stand against it.
So I have something I just thought of, which is a little bit more cynical take
Okay.
on that. Maybe the reason that powerful nations can agree on making certain types of weapons illegal, but not war itself illegal, is because it's not in their interest to outlaw war entirely, because they stand to gain, from and making sure that they can still attack when another country is aggressing, or if they want to expand on their own. But they don't need these weapons are uh, that are inhumane to achieve their goal. They have enough power that they can um, achieve this through just through conventional weapons as it is.
Indeed.
And something like chemical weapons would be something more meant for like a small group that doesn't have so much power. And what they do is they're going to say, oh, we're going to use chemical weapons against the U.S. to get our way, and then and then that shifts the balance in
Hmm.
their favor. So that's something that the U.S. wouldn't want to happen. So that way it consolidates the power within the larger countries like
Oh, I
Russia and
see.
China.
That is a very cynical take. More cynical than mine.
Well, I mean, you were kind of implying that Russia and China are good actors, and
Well, no, I was thinking of United States and England when I was thinking of the
okay,
good actors.
I see.
And Israel.
Right. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of people on Earth that would see the opposite way. Um,
Which we
just
should
as
talk
the
about.
nature of things. Yes.
Yeah.
But before that, so let's talk about. I mean, should we talk about that now?
No, we can go in order.
Okay, we'll go in order. But what is the correct order? Is it the arbitrary way I laid it out on the in the notes, or is it the natural progression of our conversation?
It's a combination of the two. The notes are just to keep us on track when we start to
Deviate.
deviate or start to lose focus on where exactly we're going. But other than that, we follow a natural, organic
Hmm.
progression.
So I quickly want to touch on transparency in war because you had said, what's very important.
Wait, sorry. I just remember that there was a bunch of questions you posed. We didn't answer nearly all of them, did we? Right? Are there more ethical ways to kill
Oh,
somebody?
yeah, of course not. But what I have here is okay. I spoke about. We already spoke about nuclear war a bit. Um,
Yes.
but okay, when it comes to killing more people, killing fewer people to save more. Um, so, for example, there's an argument that the nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima saved more lives than they took.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And Nagasaki.
and Nagasaki. Can't forget about Nagasaki. Because of how many soldiers would have been required to invade Japan and how willing the Japanese were to fight till the last soldier, it would have wound up, or till the last
Yeah.
civilian even, it would have wound up decimating both America and Japan.
I think yeah. Sorry. Keep going.
So, despite the fact, so other in other scenarios in war, you could say, well, so is it worth killing 1,000 soldiers to save 1,000,000? I think that's more straightforward. But is it worth, let's say, killing the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was probably overwhelmingly civilians. They
Yeah.
were like military ports, but like it wasn't, and okay, maybe it was a different time as well because there were so many civilian casualties in World War II. But still, like analyzing it nowadays, was it worth, like ultimately, if the war would have uh, gone on, more Japanese civilians would have died as a result.
Yeah.
So can we say, okay, to save lives, this was justified?
Justified is a hard word. I do think we can look back with the 80 years of history that we have in retrospect. I do think we can look back and say, actually, it was in terms of the number of lives lost. It actually might have been the best case scenario to end the war. Um, if America would have had to invade Japan to end the war, significantly more Japanese civilians would have died
Hmm.
than with two atomic bombs. And of course, talk about the American soldiers' lives. Certainly from an American perspective, the amount of lives lost was well worth it because zero were lost. Apart from the war up to that point, but zero were lost in the bombings. Um, but even from a Japanese perspective, I think it is actually pretty easy to say that more lives would have been lost, assuming the Japanese fervor, the Japanese insistence on fighting would continue, for who knows how long. Um, Assuming that the Japanese would have been very very stubborn to surrender, the number of Japanese lives lost probably would have been more. I think it's easy to say it would have been more if
Hmm.
America would have had to invade.
Right. But at the end of the day, we only have like a probability, a likelihood.
Hmm.
So we could say like with 99% probability or 95, whatever you want to say, um, it was more likely that more civilians would have been killed in the future. But it's a likelihood thing. The for sure death right now of this many people versus the estimated um, amount of death based off of our guesses um, in the future. So I don't know. It's I don't know. It just gets a little tricky because no, this is an unfalsifiable alternative. We'll never know for sure.
Uh, correct. I mean, I made some assumptions about, assuming some things would stay constant, assuming that, again, the Japanese
Right.
insistence on fighting to the last man would have remained for a long time, assuming that no one else would have joined the war and, I don't know, joined America, joined Japan. Um, but I also did grant that justified is a hard word. I don't know that we can talk about whether it was justified.
Mhm.
I can certainly understand it. The war had already been going on for, even just the war in the Pacific had been going on for 5 years at that point. And of course, there had just been a very long war in Europe. Um, and I'm sure for both the president and the generals, as well as for the soldiers, the idea of now invading Japan at this point seemed not something that anybody wanted to do.
And it goes back to the trolley problem as well. Like you're saying, just because you understand it, but does that make it justified? We discussed the trolley problem last episode, and is it justified to actively kill someone, harvest their organs to save other people, um, to save more lives? Taking an active approach to kill civilians to save other civilians.
We're not equating those two cases, though, right?
Um, Not equating, but why shouldn't they be? Because I don't know. I guess would you say that Hiroshima was on the track anyways? That they were gonna die. They would have been part of the invasion. I mean, they were pretty far from the actual mainland of Japan, and maybe they didn't need to die. Maybe we could consider them just completely independent observers.
Well, we are talking about war after all. And
Mhm. So in war, you're allowed to take random civilians' organs.
it all gets more complicated
It gets more
in
complicated.
war. When we're talking about somebody from the side that you're at war with, why exactly? I mean, you have to, we can't go into a kind of cold, calculated intellectual morality when it comes to talking about these things. We have to kind of acknowledge the reality of war and the situation. And
The pressure that the leaders are facing from both sides.
yes, and
Is that just an excuse, though?
I'll put it this way. This is going to sound a little
Cold and calculating?
this is going to sound a little barbaric, but when you're at war with another nation, the civilians are not they should not be targets. You should try to fight only the military, but when things get difficult enough, there's a certain legitimacy to targeting the civilians
Targeting.
if it means winning the war. But that does not
This was Cal, not me.
Meaning
You not want to go on record as being a war criminal.
you should not target civilians unnecessarily. You should not target civilians out of wrath, out of passion. But to the civilians of the country that you are at war with,
You're not even talking about collateral damage. You're saying
I'm saying
as part
that
of the war effort.
as part of a war effort, as part of a strategic move in warfare for the sake of victory, targeting civilians is at the very least, more legitimate than targeting civilians of another country that you're not at war with.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Well,
I mean,
if we acknowledge that, then
I mean,
yeah.
no, never mind. I don't even understand that either.
Okay.
You're saying specifically targeting,
I'm saying specifically targeting.
and
If
these are
if
'cause
you are
I would
pushed that
assume,
far,
but
if
I would assume that if they're truly a civilian, then there's nothing to be gained from targeting them except to terrorize the the leaders of the country
yes,
and push them.
but if that is done for the sake of victory,
I think
for the,
if you agree with that, if you hold with that, then you could justify anything, any terrorist attack.
no,
Why not?
because any terrorist attack you're saying?
You could justify any attack against civilians by saying it furthers my aims of the war.
Well, there's a difference between claiming a defense and actually having that defense. It does get dicey. I'm with you, but there's obviously a difference between needlessly targeting civilians and needfully targeting civilians. And when I say what I'm trying to do it here is I'm trying to say that the rules of war can never require somebody to be defeated if they could have won by breaking the rules of war, because that's just never going to work. It's a rule in name only. It's not a rule in practice.
Can you say that again?
The rules of war
Yes.
can never force somebody to lose a war if breaking the rules would have allowed them to win.
Okay. So why not?
But here,
So if the Russians are losing the war and they use a nuke on Kiev,
yeah,
then it's justified
in
because
in terms of the way war works, yes, that is justified because that's the move at that point. You forced me into a situation where this was my only move. You knew that I was going to do this. You gave me this as my only move. We're at war, so that's the move I'm going to take. Yeah,
so
that's
then
perfectly legitimate.
I would say that justifies September 11th, October 7th. You could say the Gazans were pushed into this, that this was their only move, was to target civilians, to kidnap civilians, because
Let's focus for a second
by
on September 11th.
okay,
Blowing up the Twin Towers was your only move.
sure,
Saying you can say something all the time, but that's very different
okay,
from
fine. Maybe I don't understand the exactly what Al Qaeda was at that point. They were hiding in mountains. They, fighting against the American military. That's just a losing battle. They they're in their mountains on their they have the AK-47s, and the Americans have A-10 overhead air supremacy. They could see a target and just drop 200 pounds of TNT. They have no option but to fight dirty.
But why are we at war? Why is there a war at all? The United States doesn't need to fight Muslims in the Middle East.
Well, obviously there was some sort of animosity between the two,
Yeah,
or at
but I'm
least one side felt that way.
but I'm saying that if if one side here were to have no desire to destroy the West or murder Americans, then we would have peace. Or murder other Middle Easterners who are not as devout as they want them to be, or other Muslims who are not as devout as they want them to be. Now, okay, maybe I'm not. Uh, of course, I'm not because I can't. I'm not going to be able to put myself fully in the shoes of
Al Qaeda
of an
terrorist.
or even of a I'm sure there are Muslims in the Middle East who sympathize with them at the time. Um,
Okay, but let's talk. I don't know, even October 7th.
yeah. So, well, here, in order to clarify my point, let's go back to Russia nuking Kiev. So, if Ukraine is pushing and Russia says, "I've had enough. I'm going to nuke Kiev," no, that's not legitimate. First of all, you warn them. First of all, you say, uh, "This has to stop. I'm being pushed to my limits here. If you continue, I'm gonna drop a nuclear bomb on your capital city." And then you wait for them to actually continue. And only if they continue, then maybe you warn again. But the point is, you do things to avoid doing that, and you only do it when it's your last resort. That's what I mean.
Okay, but the terrorists in Hamas warned Israel. They made it plenty clear that they want to attack them.
It's
Um,
not anywhere near
they
their last resort, though. They have so many other options that they just refuse to take. They refuse to take the option of demilitarizing the Gaza Strip,
okay.
of living, of acknowledging.
Russia has the option to not attack Ukraine.
Um, well, if you're talking, hold on, you're
Oh,
talking.
so you're saying if Ukraine stops, then they won't nuke them. But I don't know. You could say the whole war with Russia is needless. With Ukraine is needless. They don't have to attack them.
Well, yeah, fine, but I thought we were being a little more hypothetical than that. I'm not defending Russia in the actual reality that we're currently living in. I'm just saying that if the tides of the war shifted and Ukraine pushed into Russia. At a certain point, it's like, okay, you've pushed far enough. You've won the war because you've doubled your land size or whatever. At a certain point, if you push Russia far enough, even past where they were able to push you, and they basically make it clear to you that like you're pushing us to a brink and our only choice will be to nuke you, and then they nuke you. I don't know, that's pretty fair.
Okay, so I see what you mean in a general concept. Like if it was me, okay, and I'm getting being destroyed, and my only chance to fight back is to play dirty,
Yeah.
and I don't
Yeah.
know,
If you're
if
exactly.
if I'm being pushed and I have to, kidnap the person who's attacking me, like I just want to be left alone, and uh, I have to kidnap their family and threaten them, and that's the only way to get through to them.
But it
Um,
has to be that that
I
really was your only
I
choice.
get that, right? But the problem with that is that uh, it's subjective is if that was really your only choice. Some people, one side will say, "Well, you could have just lived in peace. You could have prospered," and the other side will say, "No, you left me no choice. I had to do this. NATO was converging on me and trying to put up try to isolate me, and that was destroying my economy and stuff." And both sides, like, there's rarely, or just never a war where one side says, "What are you doing? This is unjust," and the other side says, "Yeah, but we're going to do it anyways." They always find some justification for the war, whether it's like actually, makes sense overall, is something that could be debated and maybe goes back to the relative moralism debate. But obviously, we both agree, rational people could agree that Russia did not have to invade Ukraine. It was not actually under threat.
Mhm.
And the Gazans did not have to invade Israel. It was not under threat. Like Israel clearly did not want to kill them all before October 7th, and it's only as a result of invading that there's now a war and so many casualties.
Yeah.
But so I get that, but it's still subjective. My take on it is that no, there are objectively wrong lines. Using a nuke on a civilian population, I don't know. I just or 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 kidnapping random people to achieve your goal. I think it should just it's a no-no, no matter, even if you're left with no alternative, because otherwise I feel like you could justify a lot of things. And I feel like we could make a line saying no targeting of civilians. Collateral damage is allowed. You should try as best as you can not to, but I would say you shouldn't not let um, armies kill civilians uh, through collateral damage if it would not allow them to win the war. I don't think you could say, oh, the other side kidnapped hostages, they're holding them hostage. You have to now just give in to whatever their demands are
Right.
because you might kill some civilians on their side.
Right.
That's nonsense to me, because then
Mhm.
they'll just do it again. The optimal approach is then to just kidnap as many people as possible and always get your way.
Yeah.
So don't try to kill civilians, and don't kidnap civilians. I- If you're going to war, do what you can to limit that collateral damage. I don't see any scenario where kidnapping random people and torturing them is justified, even if you're pushed to that. I don't know. Maybe I would do it myself if I was pushed to that
So,
extent, but
have you
so I understand it, but I wouldn't do it.
have you seen
I
it?
I don't think we could allow it.
Well, so part of my point is that there is no "we allow it" in war. All of this kind of rules of war, international law, it interferes with the
I think it brings clarity.
natural evolution of peace that we're talking about, right? We're out in the wild here. I'm an animal. I'm wounded. There's another animal, a predator, who's ready to pounce on me. There are no rules here other than the game between us,
Mhm.
other than I do what I need to do to defend myself. You do what you need to do to defend yourself. Let's play. That's the
Let's
only
play.
that's the only rule.
I get that. And all's fair in war, and that's why I'm so like torn about this issue. Because yeah, I hear what you're saying. I should like if we have to kidnap, if we have to kill baby Hitler to stop World War II, I'm all for it. So I don't know. It's just then it's just some subjective, empathetic line of when is too much, and then everyone's just fighting on the news about, oh, this is too much. Nah, I don't think it's too much. If it was this, that would be too much. And then it's just everyone fighting on that, which is probably exactly what's going on, as opposed to having. I would like to see the war currently, like in the Israel-Gaza war, as they kidnapped random people. Israel is, yes, killing civilians through collateral damage and not targeting them, but because they're used as human shields and they don't have anywhere to go, it's an unfortunate consequence. We don't want to do it.
Right.
But
Is that
and
yeah.
that's how we discuss. That's how we could have a discussion of who would who's right in a war. Because otherwise, it's just all's fair in war. Do what you need to do to win. Everything's out the window, and
Yeah.
there is no right and wrong. It's might is right.
That's a very good point. I wanted I want to I want to get I want to get into that. I also want to ask you, have you ever seen the show 24?
Yes.
Oh, amazing.
Beep 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 beep.
So that show, like I think more than any other show I've ever watched, was so good at creating these super morally complex scenarios that you're like, whoa, what would I do in this situation? How do I feel about this character doing that in this situation? Like, what is the right choice in this situation? It is not simple at all. Um, and when you mentioned that, there's got to be a line, like for example, kidnapping and torturing, uh, you know,
Random people.
random people.
I think even Jack Bauer, the hero of the series, does that in order to save.
Exactly in season 2, they are trying to find where there's this nuke like in LA. There's this nuke in LA that's supposed to go off in like some number of hours, and Jack Bauer has somebody in custody who knows at least information that will hopefully lead to finding the bomb, and he refuses to talk. Jack Bauer is like, okay, like I'm calling special forces in Afghanistan. I'm having them kidnap your family, and like here's the video. They have your family. Like we are now going to start shooting your family in the head until you talk to us. And I'm like, I don't know that that's wrong.
Yeah. It's at least there, I don't know. Can we make a distinction that the guy had knowledge about the impending nuclear bomb, that he was unwilling to give up, and maybe they could have like faked shooting? I don't know. Maybe
So they did in the
that's what they
show.
did.
In
They
the
did.
show, they faked
Okay,
it. But I feel
right.
like
Because
that.
that's the problem with that I have with American, media and entertainment is that it's always like they always get around doing the actual bad thing.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, interesting moral dilemma. Actually, we didn't even shoot them. No, I want to see them shoot them so that I have to
exactly.
live with wrestle with an actual dilemma.
Yeah.
And okay, so if the person is holding this, keeping this information back, he's not just some random person.
Hmm.
His family is. Maybe there's a. No, I don't know. Yeah, his family is random. It's yeah. That's the. I would like there to be some rules, but yeah, obviously their situation. It's just a matter of scale. It's like, okay, World War II. Like it just seems so unnecessary to kill all the Jews. From a militaristic standpoint, it was a bad idea even for them, for Germany. It's part of the reason they lost the war. It was just a fanatic ideology that okay, maybe it helped, get everyone into a fanatic, fervor, religious nationalist fervor,
Hmm.
but like it was not clear at all how it accomplished their military objectives to conquering. I mean, okay, I mean, you open up. it's just so many
I,
random people dead for no
yeah.
direct benefit to the German citizens.
Yeah, so I only came up with this now. I would phrase it maybe as like there's a certain like way things work in like if we're imagining us in like the wild in that analogy where like, there's a wounded creature and there's a predator and like okay, what's the play here? There's a sort of natural there are natural rules to this conflict, and some of the assumptions are that each one is behaving in a rational self-interest. The predator needs food to eat, like the predator is hungry. The prey needs to survive. Like each of them have this sort of natural something. They have motivations that are grounded in nature in some fundamental way. It's hard to explain, of course, but when you consider somebody who's kind of like injecting some foreign idea into the way things work and then waging war based on these foreign ideas, based on these unnatural contaminations of the natural order. This idea that like everyone needs to be blonde and blue-eyed, people with black hair, Jews and Russians and all these non-Aryan,
Undesirables.
all these non-Aryans, these are lesser than.
Okay.
It's this injection of some twisted ideology into the natural way of things. It's no longer I need to eat, you need to survive, what are we going to do about this? It's now something else. You have created this twisted.
Okay, I'm not sure where you're going with that.
Well,
It sounds subjective to me. And I don't want to say it, but I would venture that there might be an argument about which genetics are actually better for survival. I don't really want to go there, but maybe, the strongest elephant or deer should pass on its genes.
But the thing is, if we are focusing on the natural order and we're using that as our reference point, there is no should. There is only what happens. What happens is what should.
Okay, so the Holocaust happened, so it should have happened.
Well, no, it happened because of somebody's twisted belief of what should happen. But the point is,
that sounds like a mental gymnastic somersault.
these are really deep things, so it's hard for me to articulate them. I believe this all fits together. If only I could articulate it.
All right, we'll have to have our faith in Cal.
You said it's dangerous to talk about, survival, right? There are some genes that maybe survive better than others, so maybe we should favor those genes over another. Is that kind of what you were saying? Not that you were actually saying that, but you were saying, well,
I was just saying that your use of nature as you're saying a twisted view of nature. I'm saying maybe actually that's what nature says itself, and it's better to twist to not go by nature.
But see, no, that's not being. Oh well, I wasn't expecting that at the end there. I won't respond to that because I don't know how to yet.
At least you're honest.
What I'm saying is that the predator and the prey.
Yes.
Neither are trying to impose some vision of what the world should look like on anybody. Each one is behaving in an instinctual, self-interested, rational manner. Each one.
Okay, I don't think we could go as far as to say that animals are rational.
Well, there is a rationality to it, certainly. Not necessarily that they articulate that rationality or that they think of it in the terms that we describe it, because we are higher level thinkers than them for sure. But there certainly is a coherence to the behavior. Is that fair so far?
No, not even true. Have you met an animal? They're crazy. They're contradicting.
That's why humans have studied animals. There is a lot of coherence to animal behavior. It's not random.
It's not random, but it's self-conflicting. I'm sure you could find like a dog will love a treat or love a human, and then the same human he'll hate or something. Uh,
I don't think so. Dogs are the most loyal. As soon as when
okay,
they
okay, fine, cats. But okay, I get what you're trying to say. I think you're trying to say, hey, we look at, a lion, which is a mass murderer, and eats, prey and tears it apart with its, random little baby cubs that didn't do anything wrong, but no one's gonna say, oh, the lion is evil and malicious, and we should force it to be a vegan, you know or kill all lions. Um, we understand that they're just acting according to their nature. And as humans, we hold ourselves to higher standards, though we do act like animals and massacre each other and uh, do what we got to do. And so I hear what you're saying, sort of. Um, and I'll give you some more time to refine it. But I think it does. I think it all comes back to the same thing about, can war be something that has rules and morality, or is it, once the gloves are off, anything goes? You could hit below the belt. Are we animals that just do it instinctively, so we can't, or we're just acting according to our nature, and therefore you can't expect anything different? Or yes, there can be rules. We shouldn't burn each other with napalm. We should only shoot each other with lead bullets. We shouldn't kidnap each other, but we can kidnap each other if it's to save millions of our own people, or kidnap random people. Yeah,
I gotta admit, I was so deep in my own thoughts
that's okay.
while you were saying that.
Do you have anything more concrete, or
Humans have a unique ability in the animal kingdom to come up with alternative ways the world ought to work and be so convinced of them that we will no longer act according to the natural order, according to what works in the fundamental rules of reality, but will now kind of work against those things in favor of what we've convinced ourselves of in our head, that we know better than all of this and things actually have to be this way. And that is the Hitler's idea of the superior race was an example of that. It was so contrary to reality. It was an imposition of a human being's constructed vision of how things ought to work, in contrast to what the world really is and what is real. So when you are playing the war game, when you are when you are defending yourself against hostility, pursuing your interests, but within the framework that the world is based on, you are fighting morally. But when you break the framework and say, I'm now going to fight for something that is an injection, because only humans are able to do this. Animals can't do this. Only humans are able to kind of decide that, like, I'm above all of this. I'm now going to impose my vision upon all of this. And when you're fighting a war for that reason, you're fighting an immoral war.
interesting? So I have something to add to that, because I saw in my notes what I had actually written
Okay.
about what defines the right side of the war. So we heard your side, um, and it's interesting. Uh, it's still maybe a little vague, but
Okay.
but I think you're onto something. With humans are able to do something that animals can't.
Hmm.
What is it? It's the desire to live in peace, ideally. So the lion can't live in peace because it needs to eat. There's no getting around that fact.
Can it live in peace with other lions?
It could live in peace with some other lions, but not if there's it could only be like one male lion in a or something,
In
or
a
a few
pride?
in a pride, and other ones they fight and kick the other one out. Um,
But
but it's all,
is that because of the need to eat?
yeah, and resources and mating. I don't think it's, I mean, maybe it's just because it wants to be the king of the hill and get everything to itself and spread its genes um, more than the other lions. But that way the strongest wins. But my point is, exactly that. That okay, maybe maybe lions are unnecessarily mean sometimes and evil,
Hmm.
but humans don't have to be. We have the ability to control the amount of resources so that everyone can live together and not starve and live happy enough uh, lives with enough wealth for everyone. Enough. We have the ability to have enough for everyone.
Hmm.
We don't have to go to war. And so the right side is that side which wants to live in peace and that which prefers peace over war, but left with no alternative against an aggressor. Um, so that's one opinion. That's one part of it. The right side is also that side which tries to reduce civilian casualties. Um, it's because because it recognizes that it shouldn't have to do that. Um, it's transparent because it's just important to be clear on what you're actually doing and not obfuscating or you're trying within you can't be too transparent because otherwise you give away all of your plans. Um, and whether it has like whether it's up against an oppressive regime which like cracks down on its I see how I'm getting a little it's a lot of things that decide the right side, and it could be some of these can be contradicting.
Wait,
um,
which ones are contradicting?
well, not it's like you could have one side be an oppressive regime but also say that they want to live in peace and they have see no alternative, but they have to really
We
like
want to live in peace as long as we dominate the world.
right, or they just want to dominate their own people, like North Korea. I don't
Hmm.
know. They want. To me, it doesn't seem like he's bent on world domination, just on North Korean domination.
Korean domination, including
Sure.
South
Okay.
Korea.
We'll include South Korea, but let's say he was only cared about securing North Korea.
Hmm.
So he would say, "I want to live in peace. There's enough resources for all of us. So just don't attack me. I won't attack you." But like, still, that's not the right. If America does decide to go to war with it one day, it would do so because this is an oppressive regime that's like torturing its own people.
Hmm.
So that it's like another aspect of the same thing, but it's it ultimately comes down to, do you desire to live in peace and not oppress your own people and not uh, kill civilians? Do you not like killing civilians? You don't see like an entire group of people as a target just because of who they are
Right.
if they don't pose a threat.
Yeah. It's it's hard to identify or define or concretize, but there is certainly a distinction between one who fights only because it's necessary and one who relishes fighting, or one who fights because they want to dominate over another or to watch someone else burn. It's the distinction is obvious that it can exist. Whether we can always identify it or define it, I think doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Hmm. Yeah, it does, because each side is going to say like, "Oh, I do want to live in peace." If you ask, the funny thing is, like, we're Westerners, we're Israeli, we identify also with America and the West and
Canada.
Canada and Europe in a way, maybe. Um,
We don't want to make it clear where we're from. We just throw out a bunch of
yeah,
options.
obfuscate. As in, I'm including Europe in the West and Western thinking, and
Hmm.
but if we were to ask someone from North Korea, from China, from Iran, from a Palestinian, from Syria, all of these which are like the quintessential enemies of the West per se,
Hmm.
and I've seen this on YouTube or something. They ask them, they say they want to live in peace,
Hmm.
and you see that and you're like, what are they talking about? And then in the next sentence they'll say, and we can only live in peace when like America's destroyed, and because and like America is the Satan. They're the reason why there's so much conflict. They're trying to like take over the world. And so they see this, we see it differently. And I think that we both think that not only is it a matter of seeing it different, the same, it's not a matter of seeing the same thing differently. It's not a painting that you're seeing from one angle and I'm seeing from a different angle and they're seeing from a different angle. It's like, no, we actually do think that America, because it's a democracy, because, so it's more will of the people than Russia or China or North Korea or Iran. These are not like democratic societies. Their people are also like the amount of freedom that they're allowed is super restricted. Ability to protest, all of these things, like we would say they're objectively like they're in the wrong. Like America just wants to grow economically for everyone to prosper and to like just stop war across um, the whole world. And then they'll say, no, America wants oil and to expand, and they want to just they want to dominate everyone. They think they're better than everyone. Everything we do is in self-defense to keep them from taking over. So, like sometimes I'm like, I mean, usually I'm like, okay, they're crazy. This is propaganda that they're being fed. Um, but like, how much should I like question and doubt my own narrative and the Western narrative? Um, and how much is it, two people looking at the same thing and two valid ways of looking at it? I don't know. Can one side say that it's always in self-defense? I mean, the issue of escalation is always that things get lost. You have if you put a whole bunch of monkeys in a room and they're all fighting each other, and then you take the original monkeys out and you replace one by one, they still keep fighting and they don't know why they're fighting, but they're fighting and they know the other side is wrong. I'm pretty sure they've done experiments like this, and they're like doing this thing just because it's tradition. And no, like okay, they saw, oh, they attacked us, so we have to attack them. And then the other side says, oh, well, they attacked us, so we have to attack them. And so it's always self-defense. It's always the other side's the aggressor, but it's not really always. But it's just, I don't know. It's
So
kind of crazy.
that comes up in the Veritasium video, by the way, that because it is possible to get into a sort of cycle of retaliation, cycle of violence. Um, there's a kind of added element. I have to look back, and because tit for tat doesn't incorporate this. Tit for tat is simple. I wonder if they're saying that like when we really model everything according to the way the world really does work, and we include the possibility of a mistaken move in the game, so that I intended to cooperate, but the other person interpreted it as ratting them out. If we model it that way, then the winning strategy actually does have to have some mechanism to kind of break out of a retaliatory cycle.
Mm.
So
So even though tit for tat is the optimal strategy, it has this local
it
minimum it could get stuck in,
well
or global.
Oh, yeah. Tit for tat. Well, yeah, because if if you have two tit for tats playing against each other, and one of them, and in the system you have it so that it's possible for something to be misinterpreted. So it's possible for one side to make a move that is then interpreted as the opposite by the other side. So you could run into a situation where, yeah, tit for tat ends up performing poorly because they interpreted it as an attack. They retaliated. The other person now retaliates to their
Mhm.
retaliation.
It's like an off by one error that because one person starts his tit for tat a second one round earlier, and so
Yeah, yeah,
you have this optimal strategy that winds up being negative for
yeah,
uh, both sides, like in the prisoner's dilemma or something.
yeah,
So you have to have some way of saying, okay, not just tit for tat, but we'll do some kind tit for tat or whatever it's called, where we'll just assume the other side made a mistake, give them a little leeway,
exactly.
don't bear a grudge,
Yeah,
which is extremely hard for humans to do because
very
we're
hard.
severely distrusting of others.
Yeah. I think we have seen that it definitely is possible. Um, and like the strategy that they suggest in the Veritasium video is that you retaliate 9 out of 10 times. there's a 10% chance that somebody hits you and you don't hit back,
Mhm.
something like that.
So, can you think of any examples in history where one side was like, "Oh, okay, we'll let this one slide."
Well, actually, it comes up in the video. I keep quoting the video because, like,
Mhm.
like I said, I don't know history. um,
Right, right.
but it comes up in the video that there was a case during the Cold War, it seems, where there was it seems like some illusion with the sun and a UFO of some sort of thing flying through, and
UFO. No, it was
yeah,
yeah, it was a solar storm detected by a satellite was misinterpreted as a nuclear launch.
nice.
Okay.
And so, but the Soviets didn't nuke, didn't
Mhm.
didn't send the nukes because they weren't sure, or they thought, like,
Mhm.
maybe it's nuclear.
Maybe it's a mistake.
Maybe it's a mistake. Exactly.
Mhm.
Um,
But can you think of any
Other examples.
examples where I don't know, I'm thinking of like the retaliatory escalation between Israel and Iran and how it like one point like it seemed like it was just oh you attack they attack and then just back and forth who's going to back down first and then I don't know it seemed sort of like Iran backed down. I don't know if it was probably
It,
not necessarily of the nature of their own
you mean after the American strike?
nature. Yeah, this was way before all
Uh,
of that. I don't know. It just, I don't know. Sometimes maybe countries, when they're stuck in that cycle, just let one go or something, and then actually, I, I don't know. I feel like it never actually happens, and because they said, "Oh, we're going to respond, and we're just going to hold on to our right to respond." I don't know. I'm just trying to think of where did a country say we're not going to respond. Maybe in India, Pakistan, there was one side that had the last bomb, and then they said, okay, fine, ceasefire. Um, so maybe it does happen where like tit for tat, and then like you to break out of that cycle
hmm
without it devolving into just endless tit for tat. Like eventually it has to
I mean, frankly,
end.
I think that Israel earlier in its history was probably more forgiving than it is now. I think through Israel's history, they've been a little hardened by the Middle East, where now they're like, no more games. If somebody attacks us, we're gonna show them what's up. But
I don't know. I think they've been pretty tit for tat from the get go. That not letting anything go under the rug.
um, well, I guess I was thinking that after the Independence War, um, like Israel would have been happy at that point to, they were just happy to survive, which I guess that's the answer. Like you're
But then the Suez crisis, and then where they sort of went because of Britain, because Egypt closed the Suez or was threatening to, and so France and England spurred Israel on to attack because this was bad if they nationalized the Suez or something. Um,
was that leading up to the 6 Day War?
that was like in '56, and then in the Six Day War, yeah,
Uh,
Israel also preemptive strike. I would say that
yeah,
like
but if there was ever, preemptive strikes, I think sometimes get a little like preemptive strike. Like, did you actually have to do that? But the 6 Day War was like, yeah, if there was ever a preemptive strike, that was pretty clear that
re-
was,
impending,
yeah.
yeah. But my point is just that like okay, maybe Jews over time, you know, before Israel, it was always oh they attacked us, we're not going to fight back, it'll just make everything worse, run away sort of thing. And
hmm
then the Israeli mentality was like enough of this. Anything when they attack, we attack back. And which is probably why we're always, we never let we're like, oh, we can't like lose a single war. We can't give them anything,
hmm
um, which is justified because a lot of they don't our enemies don't want to stop until we're destroyed. But on the other hand, maybe some of them just want of any victory at all, and that like the peace with Egypt and Israel, they see it for some reason. They see the Egyptians see the peace in 79 as evidence that they won the war that was in 73, even though when they attacked in 73, they attacked Israel and they took over some of the Sinai, but then Israel fought back and pushed them back. And so Egypt didn't win any land.
hmm
Um, and it was years later 6 years later that they finally made peace, and then the Sinai was returned to Egypt.
Hmm.
And then they said, "Oh, look, see, we won because we took ultimately, we achieved our because they were too afraid and they gave back." Um, they gave back the land they had because they won in 67 because they're afraid of us. But Israel just sees that as no, we just want to live in peace and we're happy to or we're willing to give up land in order to do this. And so both sides like kind of have their vision of, oh, we won because of this, and so just giving them that little victory in their head, even though we see it as a victory, they see it as a victory, and that led to peace. So this idea of just letting the other side win sometimes, letting an aggression go,
Hmm.
um, is actually what's required for peace. Otherwise, you're stuck in this cycle forever, which is, I don't know, just an interesting theory I have about. I don't know. I'm always like thinking about the conflict, Israel Palestine. There's these two separate schools of thought, which is if we give in, if we lose a war, if we say, okay, well, you guys won this round, then that'll empower them to do more and more because they'll see that as a victory. On the other hand, as an honor thing, they'll feel like they've regained their honor because they've just always lost every single war. And once they finally win once, maybe that means they'll stop because they finally won something. So, and that would ultimately lead to peace, which would be, something Israel wants. So, I don't know. Those are the two conflicting opinions that I go back and forth between, like how best to approach the um, this conflict. But let's touch upon some other conflicts. Um, so,
I think we have to, for anyone who's listening and is unaware, it is now almost 2 a.m. where we are, which will remain unclear because we're from so many places. Um, but I think we should leave the rest for part two. I think we should have a war part two.
a war part two.
Yeah.
Do we have enough content?
how, how much more content do we have in the notes?
Not so much.
Not so much.
I think we could finish it in 10 minutes.
I don't think so because even just that part, that who was right in the following conflicts, I thought that is like plenty. There's plenty of meat there
Really?
for
But I
very.
feel like we touched upon, just for context, these conflicts are the Roman expansionism, the American Revolution, the American Civil War, World War II, Israel Palestine, Russia Ukraine. All of those, except for the American Revolution and Civil War, um, were basically spoken about in terms of their morality and which side we think is correct or not.
They were touched
But
on, but let's
but those could be definitely fleshed out more.
for sure.
Hmm. All right. Okay. So war is it's a big topic.
It's good for a lot of things.
Good for a lot of things. Good for content, at least. We got a lot of content.
Yep.
And yeah, we're gonna pick up on this, and because there's always more war and more stuff to talk about. It's the gift that keeps giving.
Indeed. Human animosity.
And even and maybe also next time we'll transition into peace,
Mm.
and we touched upon it a bit today, but maybe peace and more about like what cooperation looks like and what a utopian society might look like. What do we think the future could look like, and how to build love between every man and his fellow, and what that looks like. And hopefully by the next time we meet, war will be over, all of it. No more war.
Amen.
Amen. And a woman.
All right. Good night, wherever we are. We're in Israel. But where are we from? I don't know. Good night.
All right. Stay safe out there, and don't get nuked. This has been the Benji Cal Podcast.